Welcome back, finally, to another Extreme Book Club video. If you don't know how these work on my channel, we try to find some of the most gory, messed up books we can review on this channel, which is where our searches led us to today. A book that has been heavily requested ever since I started this series back in early January. And that book that we're covering today is Nick Cutter's The Troop. Nick Cutter is an author we have not covered before, and I think that sucks because we've only really scratched the tip of the disturbing literature iceberg. Which, by the way, I might be doing a dark literature iceberg at some point, maybe 75k subs, but we'll see. But this book is quite famous in the splatterpunk community, so it's a wonder I haven't covered this one yet. And if you don't know what splatterpunk is a subversion of the normal horror genre of being subtle and creepy by being in your face, disgusting, and having really dark themes to it. This one is definitely better written than some of the books we've covered, and it's not all just disturbing stuff for the sake of it, but it has a message to it as well. And I feel, like some of the better books we've covered like The Har and Maggie's Grave, it is a classical feeling horror book with a splatterpunk twist. It could easily be made into a movie. However, this book is slightly longer than most of the other books we've covered, clocking in at about 360 pages, as opposed to the average of about 225 that we usually do. So this video might be a bit longer than the other ones, but that is a good thing, because the story is pretty solid. If you do not know how we do reviews on this channel, let me break it down for you. We start out with an intro, which you are listening to now, and then we get into the summary, which is the bulk of the video. Then we get into the themes and messages of the book in the analysis after the summary, where we will talk about the reason the book does what it does. So if you enjoyed some of the more fun splatterpunk books like this, you'll probably like this one as well. I do want to warn you guys, however, like I did with the warning at the beginning, that this book does share the child death and mutilation thing like in Playground, another book we've covered, so be prepared for that. But without going too much further into it, let's get into Nick Cutter's The Troop. As soon as you start this book, you will notice something peculiar. It will start with a newspaper or an online article, and after most chapters, there will always be another newspaper article to go over. It will usually be some explanation of the world or some event going on in the world of the troop, which is a pretty cool way to give exposition. But let's get on with it. The title of this article is The Hungry Man of Prince County. It describes a man who stole a woman's truck. A man, whom the woman calls Starvin' Marvin, came into this woman's diner, and she said the man came into her diner one night and he was skinny. Skinnier than she could ever believe a man could be. But man, was this skinny guy hungry. He ordered 5 Hungry Man breakfasts from the menu, each of which consisted of a good amount of food, and it completely ran the diner out of eggs. Then when she came back to check on him, he was pulling napkins out of the dispenser, and was eating those too. After, he'd eaten so much that his belly was distended and weird looking. The man then paid and left. The woman ended her shift and went outside to see her truck had been stolen. The waitress says she isn't surprised. This Starvin' Marvin guy seemed to be desperate. Desperate in a way she'd never even seen before. It was crazy. But she felt like there was something within him. Something not normal. Then it gives related articles to this, which all seem to be classic tabloids like A Cheeseburger Ate My Wife and stuff like that. Then we get into the actual book. It describes a man who keeps saying how hungry he is. He was on a boat that he had stolen from a dock from North Point, which he got to from the truck that he hotwired in a diner parking lot. Man, was he hungry. He skidded across the water in the boat, heading for a small island to the north just off Prince Edward Island in Canada. He'd eaten so much of the diner that his stomach lining had popped, but he didn't care. He needed to fill up the emptiness inside of him. On the way here, he saw a dead raccoon on the side of the road. It took everything he had not to stop the car, and no, he couldn't do such a thing. But man, was he hungry. He wishes he could have just ripped open that raccoon's dead roadkill carcass and ate its sinewy meat, but he couldn't. He had to run. He couldn't go back to Edgerton. He had to run and hide. As he skidded across the water in the boat, a small island came into view in the darkness. The end of the chapter is a geological survey, a place called Falstaff Island, which after looking up appears to be a real place, but it seems to have been made famous by this book in particular, as the entire setting of the book is on this island. This survey explains what wildlife lives on this island, and the fact that no one lives on it full time. Campers and Boy Scouts do, however, sometimes go up there. Tim Riggs, the Scoutmaster of Troop 52, is waiting this night in his cabin. He pours himself a think of scotch, and he looks to the light bulb covered in moths. The kids of his troop were in their cabin, in bed. Not asleep, but in bed. They were probably telling ghost stories or something like that. Man, he needed to drink this tonight. He would be alone with these boys for the next couple of days, and he needed a sip of alcohol every once in a while to deal with that. He heard a spout of laughter from the boys' cabin. Was that Ephraim laughing? Or Kent? It didn't really matter. At that age, boys are so full of energy and adrenaline and hormones that they're up all night, all the time. They weren't going to go to bed anytime soon, at least. But Tim needed this trip too, just as much as them. Tim Riggs was alone, an outcast among the adults. He was 42 and single. He moved here from Ontario to Prince Edward Island, and people looked at him like an outsider. But kids, they didn't care so much. It was nice. The 5 kids here were probably on their last hurrah as scouts as well, as, let's be honest, being in scouts is kind of dorky, Tim says. No one of this generation really wanted to be one anymore. Brown uniforms and badges and all of that. But the kids were almost a family to him now, considering he didn't have one. All the way through Cub Scouts, then Adventurers, then Eagle Scouts. These kids have always been with him. But this was probably it for them. Them all being in their middle teens now. It was dorky. Kent, a jock-like boy, very popular and a natural-born leader. Max and Ephraim, the 2 best friends, almost attached at the hip. Ephraim had a little bit of anger problems, but he was a good kid. Shelley was also there, who was kind of a weirdo, but no one was ever really mean to him about it. And then Newton, who, let's face it, Tim says, he's a nerd. As nerdy as they come. Tim thought of them almost as family, as this is probably the last outing they'd have. He'd thought about Newt some more. Poor kid. It wasn't enough that Newt was overweight and smart and wore glasses. He was just kind of a born nerd. He just gave off that vibe. He then thought about Shelley, the weird one. It was weird, but he didn't give off a vibe at all. Every kid gave off some sort of vibe, but not Shelley. Weird. It's getting late, though. Tim turns off the generator and slaps the mosquitoes away from his neck. They always liked him. As he did, though, in the new silence of the generatorless night, he heard something. It sounded like an engine out on the water. For some reason, he thought of the Carl Jung saying, "The wickedness of others become our own wickedness, because it kindles something evil inside our hearts." What a blowhard Jung was. At least that's what Tim thought. Tim was a doctor, and he had an undergrad in psychology as well. Just then, the engine noise stopped. The man arrived on shore just then. Man, he was hungry. He had to eat anything. He bent down and picked up some algae from the lake and slurped it up. Then he saw a crab. Finally, meat. He picked it up and put the living crab inside of his mouth. It snipped his tongue as he did, and then he looked on the island. A building in the distance with the light on. Maybe there'd be food there. In the cabin with the kids, Ephraim was telling stories. Ephraim says, a long time ago, in Nepal, they had these warriors called Gurkhas. Insane men, but crazy good warriors. They could shoot the pollen off the ass of a bumblebee. Natural killers. Once, a plane of these men went down right around this area. If they survived, they might even be on this very island. Mad with hunger. Insane from living in the wilderness for so long. They say that if you put your shoelaces in a straight line, the way the Gurkhas tie their shoes, they will spare you and not eat you. But if not, they'll kill you while you sleep. Anyway, good night, guys, he says. As he does, the light goes off and Max uses his flashlight to see Newt on the ground tying his laces straight. They all laugh at him. Kent says, "Newt, you bedwetter." They all make fun of him for getting scared by the story when Scoutmaster Tim comes in. Says, "Time for bed. Knock it off." Tim left the room and then he saw it. A boat. Tim was frightened. He readied his knife, slightly scared. But Tim was a calm man. He was a doctor after all. He had spent a year in Afghanistan with the Doctors Without Borders, but this is different. Someone is on the island. Tim thought to himself, he's just being paranoid. It's probably just Newt's parents, or a drunk fisherman who got lost. Nothing to worry about. He's 99% sure. He looked at the tree line and saw something. A shadow. He shined his flashlight and was horrified what he saw. A man, but little more than a skeleton, skinny as can be. "Do you have any food?" he said. Tim, gathering his thoughts and his nerves, says he might. The man looked like he needed something, like on a primal level, but Tim couldn't quite place it other than him being hungry. It was unnerving. The skeleton man asked Tim, "Is he here alone?" Tim says, "Yes." He lies, saying he's doing geographical surveys. "What are you doing here?" he says. The man bends down and takes a handful of sand and puts it in his mouth. Tim says, Hold on. You don't have to eat that. I have food. Relax." The man smiled a horrible, toothy grin and walked over to Tim. Tim smelled something just then. A sickly, sweet aroma. Since Tim was a doctor, he immediately placed what this was. Ketosis. The smell that gave off was a sickly, sweet smell like this. The body consuming itself. "Yes, good," the man said as he walked over to Tim. Tim was a doctor. He'd seen horrible things when it came to the human body. Tumors, colonoscopy bags, all of it. But whatever this man had, it sent a shiver up Tim's spine. Tim tried to hold the man up as they walked back to the cabin, and he thought he felt something wriggling around in his stomach. But he figures it must have just been gas. His stomach. There's gotta be something wrong with his stomach. But he let him into the cabin and he says, "Hold on. Is someone missing you? Are you lost?" Tim asks. The man says, "No, he's just hungry. So hungry. He'll leave in the morning, he promises. He's just hungry." Tim lets him in the cabin. He puts the man down on the bed and he looks even worse in the light. The skin around his stomach was all loose, like a Shar-Pei. Someone who had seen dramatic weight loss, it looked like. Tim then heard noises. The boys woke up. Great. Tim went over to their cabin real quick. "What's up, Tim?" Kent said. He no longer called him Scoutmaster Tim, a weird pushy thing he'd been doing lately. Tim figures Kent was destined for this kind of life, being a popular jock bully. Being named Kent will do that to you, like being named Tanner or Chad or something. But even over in this cabin, he could still smell that man. Like his sweet smell was permeating all the way over here. Tim says, a man arrived on the island. He doesn't know who. Newt asks, "Is it an adventurer? Does he have a tent?" Tim says, "No, he's got something else. Like a disease. Maybe something from another part of the world." "Maybe it's a Gurkha," Shelley hisses out. Tim says, "No, it's not a fucking Gurkha." Kent says they should call the mainland. Tim says, "Yeah, he's going to. But for now, just stay here. Remember, he's a doctor. This guy's best chance right now. But these kids, they need to stay in their cabin." He leaves the boys and goes back. He goes onto the shortwave radio because they don't have cell phones, one of Tim's rules for the scouts when they go out like this. And as Tim switches on the radio, the man springs to life with an unnatural strength and pushes the radio off the table. It hits the ground and he starts stomping on it. "God damn it, stop!" Tim yells and grabs the man as he coughs up a glob of brown liquid on Tim's face. Tim recoils and thinks about dropping the guy right now. How fucking disgusting. Unclean, he thinks. The man's body then goes limp, and Tim grabs his medical kit. He cleans off his face, the brown spit that covered his face dripping off like acid, and then Tim looks at the man and sees green goo around his lips. Algae? Had this guy been eating rock algae? Well, that's gross, but not contagious, at least, he thinks. He's okay. Everything's fine. He puts the man back on the bed as pounds come from the door. The boy's trying to get in. Tim shouts for them to stay outside. Kent says, "Open this door right now, Tim." Tim says, "Kent Jenks, if you keep doing that, I'm going to make sure your father hears about it." Kent immediately stops pounding. Kent's dad was the town's cop, and Kent was a handful, but that would always get him to shut up mentioning his dad. Max asks, "What happened to the radio?" And Tim says, "The guy just freaked out. He doesn't know. Just go back to bed. If worse comes to worse, this guy came here in a boat. They can leave if shit really hits the fan. But for now, go to bed." The kids leave Tim, and Tim thinks back to a time when he was a kid when he saw a homeless man in a parking garage, and his face was all black and bubbly, like an incurable sickness. Like if he were to touch that man, his fingers would sink into his flesh and infect him too. That's the same vibe he gets with this guy. A horrible primordial feeling of fear, of sickness this guy has. The whites of this man's eyes are brown. Worst of all, the man seems alert, aware, like he knows something is wrong with him. That's gotta be worse. The end of this chapter is a military document, saying that the Canadian military has descended upon the small town where the boys lived the next morning. The military has quarantined off the docks, and any travel north of the town on the water is now prohibited. Yet, they tell no one what is happening. The next chapter is the same as the previous chapter, but from the boys' perspective. The boys sat there, and Kent says, "Let's go in there." Kent was a big kid. Not many would challenge him. Recently, he keeps challenging adults, like calling Scoutmaster Tim just Tim, or calling his teachers by their first names. Newt says the Scoutmaster Tim told him to stay put. Kent says, "Shut up, nerd." Ephraim agrees with Newt, though. They should stay put. This gets Kent to pause. Ephraim was different from Newt. He wasn't a milquetoast nerd like him, he was a hothead, a powder keg waiting to get lit. "Why not?" Kent asks Ephraim. Ephraim says, "Because." Kent says, "That's it? Because?" Kent continues to try to open the door, and he stops only after the Scoutmaster threatens to call his dad. They all then went to sleep after Tim told them the news, and Newt couldn't sleep. All night there were these munching noises and cabinets opening. He tries to wake Max, but Max just tells him to go to sleep. He wonders how all the other boys could sleep through this. Maybe they weren't. Maybe they were just pretending not to notice the noises. Maybe they were just as scared as him. Max thought about how a couple of summers ago, he and Ephraim worked on his grandpa's farm. They were FFs after all. Forever friends. One better than BFFs. They got a couple of bucks an hour grinding chicken bones into bone meal for his grandpa, who said that nothing grows crops like bone meal. Last night, Max was lying awake, hearing those crunching noises. It reminded him of when he ground those bones for his grandpa. It sounded the same. He wondered if Ephraim was up thinking the same thing, thinking of those chicken bones. When they all awoke the next day, they went to Tim's cabin. There, Scoutmaster Tim waited. Newt noticed as they walked in crumbs on the floor near the sick man, who lied on the floor covered in blankets now. Newt also noticed that there were crumbs on Tim's vest too. Tim notices Newt looking at him strangely, and he says, "He got hungry watching this guy last night. He had to watch him all night long. He didn't sleep, so he had some crackers." So it was Tim they heard eating, not the sick man in the early hours. Tim says, "As they can see, this sick guy broke their radio last night. He might be in trouble with the law or something in addition to being sick." "What are we gonna do?" Newt asks. Tim says that's what he's gonna try to figure out. Tim says that this man here came in a boat, a small one, but there's no way they could all fit in it. Maybe some of them could, but first things first, Tim says he knows his own rules about no one bringing a cell phone in here. But right now, he won't be mad. In fact, he would be relieved did anyone smuggle a phone in. Newt says, no, of course not. Tim asks Kent and Ephraim, the two troublemakers. Both said they thought about it, but no. Kent says maybe they can go on their boat and get his dad. And Kent's dad was an extremely huge 6'7", 250 pounds of law enforcement wall of meat. A police officer. Tim says, well, the plan for now is to just continue with the original plan for this trip before the man got here. The kids were going to go on a nature trek today, and he's going to try to figure something out. He's going to try to figure out how to deal with the sick man. Kent says, continue with the plan? The plan is fucked. Newt gasped. No one should curse in front of an adult. Tim ignores the curse word and asks, what is Scout Law number 7? Kent stammers as Tim puts his hand on her shoulder. Kent sweats and Newt starts to say the rule, but Tim snaps and says, let Kent say it. And Kent says, a scout obeys his scoutmaster. Tim says, that's right. They have to obey any order, because that is what scouts do. They can voice any concerns and gripes with that order after the order was carried out. So get going. The boys left. They didn't want to be with that thing anyway. The kids left and Tim grabbed his face. Tim looked over at the man for the spark plugs on the boat, as when he went out this morning to check the boat, there were no spark plugs in it. They couldn't leave on the boat even if they wanted to. But he didn't want to tell the kids that. The place where he spit that brown liquid on Tim's face burned. And now, he felt hungry. And he felt a fever coming on. Was this man contagious? Starve a cold, feed a fever, right? That was the saying? Which, by the way, the real phrasing is the opposite. Tim takes out his walkie-talkie and says, "You have your order, dog faces. Get going." Then he looks down at the sick man. The document at the end of this chapter was an interview with the mother of the sick man, Tom Paget, or as the media called him, Typhoid Tom. His mother said that Tom grew up chubby, and people found that funny after the whole incident on Falstaff Island. But it was anything but. Tom grew up bullied because of his chubby size. But that didn't mean Tom was a weakling. Despite him being a little chubby, he could defend himself. She said that her son didn't avoid all of those names and what happened to him. His only sin was taking a job from Dr. Edgerton. The truth is, Tom Paget was dead even before he reached Falstaff Island. The beginning of the next chapter goes over Ephraim and Mac's friendship. They looked like opposites. Ephraim was tall, lean, and muscular, twitching with anticipation, ready to erupt with fury at any moment. Max was shorter, stout, not fat or anything, but solid. They would talk about the stupidest shit, like what was the best candy, or who was hotter in their class, or who would win in a fight, a shark or a zombie. But one day, Ephraim told Max that his dad once broke his arm. He came home one night and hit him. Hard. He went to jail for it, and him and his mom visited him. And the thing is, his dad didn't even remember doing it. Like it was a blocked out memory. They talked like that. They could talk about the stupidest shit and the most serious shit. Forever friends, right? The boys walked on their trek. As they did, Kent turned to face Max and told him to give him the walkie-talkie. Max didn't even bother fighting it. Kent was the biggest after all, the strongest. He wasn't smart like Newt or charismatic like Ephraim, but he was big, tough, a brick shithouse, one might say. Kent's dad was like that too. Huge. One time, his dad took him on a ride along, and Kent saw how bad shit could be firsthand. He saw a domestic dispute, one which involved cucking, which his dad told Kent that, quote, "There's nothing worse in this world than a cuck," which is a very random thing to drop in the middle of this book, but alright. The point was that Kent saw that adults are just messed up as kids. Maybe more so. When you're a kid, you think adults have it all figured out, but that's not true, Kent thinks. Adults are people too. They don't know any more than kids a lot of the time. And he presented himself as a leader because of all of this. So, Max gave him that walkie-talkie, no questions asked. Newt goes over and tells Max he should have kept the walkie-talkie. Scoutmaster gave it to him, after all. Max just says, "Shut up, Newt." Max was in a particularly bad mood this morning. Something was off about this whole situation, with this sick man. And besides, Newt could take it. He was always picked on, but Newt always got back up. Newt could take any torment they throw at him. Right? Ephraim started a game to lighten the mood. Would you rather? His favorite. He started with, would you rather eat a cow pie or let a hobo fart in your face? To which everybody says the cow pie, which is crazy to me, by the way. Newt then chimes in, oh, I know one. Would you rather give a speech in front of the whole class or have your bathing suit fall off in a public pool? They all groaned. Newt was so lame. They all start ragging on him when Kent calls them back to knock it off. The boys then apologize to Newt. Ephraim then continues. Would you rather jerk off a donkey or finger bang Kathy Reinbach, a girl who was in the class that was with another guy? What's a finger bang? Newt says. Shelley just says, the donkey. No one wants sloppy seconds. They all groaned again. But they didn't rag on Shelley. He was just a weirdo. He had this way of sucking the air out of any fun game. They all continued following Kent, who led them to a ledge that they had to shimmy across. If they fell, they would slide all the way down a sheer cliff face into the water. It wouldn't kill them, but it would be bad. Broken bones, at least. They all make their way across it, but just barely. Newt almost falls in and has to be saved, and then the thought in Ephraim's head pops up that if they aren't careful, they could actually die here. The five boys get across, and then Ephraim goes up to Kent and asks, whose big fucking idea was it to go this way? Kent, was it you big dumb fuck? Kent felt a rage build in him, and Ephraim put his hands into a fist. Although Kent was huge and a jock, he'd never been in a fight. Him being that big was a good deterrent. Ephraim, on the other hand, was shorter, sure, but he was a hothead. He was in plenty of fights, and he won all of them. Kent felt shame rise in his throat, and he backed down from Ephraim. He heard his cop dad in his head calling him a sheep. They all looked over the stony-faced cliffs towards the ocean and see a helicopter, a huge black one doing strange maneuvers. They all waved to it. Man, that is cool. But they look further ahead and see a bunch of boats as well in the water. military ones just anchored. Sometimes the military does drills here, but that's a lot of them, Ephraim says. Kent, trying to reestablish dominance, says, "Careful, Newt. They're whaling boats. They're gonna come and skewer your fat ass." Newt didn't budge, but Kent felt better. But a small part of him still felt ashamed for backing down earlier. The end of the chapter is a transcript from a therapy session. This happens one more time, by the way, in the book, and these two transcripts from the therapy sessions are my favorite parts of the book. I don't know why, but the way the kids talk in them are so strangely human. More so than any books I've ever read. The first therapy session in this chapter is Ephraim. His therapist asks him, why does he get so angry all the time? Where does it come from? Ephraim just says he doesn't know. They go back and forth, and the therapist then says, we're going to try something new. He just wants Ephraim to tell him a story. Any story. So, Ephraim does. He says, a couple of years back, a carnival came to town and everyone was stoked. They all got their tickets, but when they got there, all the animals were skin and bone. Sad looking. And the rest of the carnival wasn't all that great either. Well, during that carnival, a tiger got loose one night, and everyone around town was freaking out. A tiger in a small Canadian town? It could kill someone. 3 days went by with no sightings. Kent's dad patrolled all day and night with a huge rifle hanging out of his car looking for it. Well, one night Ephraim went to go take out the trash, and he saw it. A tiger just sitting in his backyard. It was beautiful, majestic. A big cat like that in Canada. Ephraim felt bad for it, because it didn't belong here, a big creature like that. It ate some of his trash and ran away over his fence. Ephraim says that he hoped that somehow the tiger ran away and had tiger children somehow. But the next day, Kent's dad shot it and killed it. Ephraim cried over it, because he felt like that tiger, alone in a place where he didn't belong. The next chapter starts with the radio cracking on, saying, "Oh my god, what is that?" Kent turns on the radio and asks, "What's wrong?" Tim asks, "Why does Kent have the walkie-talkie?" And he says, "Never mind, just stay on the trail." Newton gives Tim coordinates, and Tim says, "They're a bit off track, but they're not that far away. Just continue on the trail." The sun was setting now, and the boys decided to play King of the Hill on a pile of moss-covered rocks. They would try to push each other over and off of it, which turned to Kent and Ephraim trying to push each other off because no one else even stood a chance. It went on for a bit, and Kent pushed Ephraim off the rocks pretty hard, to which Ephraim gets angry but remembers his therapist's words. Do not be a slave to your anger, Ephraim. So, Ephraim found Newt nearby and kicks him in the ass. Newt asks, why did he just do that? He has ears, there's no need to do that. Ephraim says he needs first aid. Kent knocked him over and his elbow's bleeding. Newt then takes out his first aid kit. This was Newt's role in the group, despite being bullied all the time. He was the nurturer, the mother almost. The group accepted this role for Newt, but they also still bullied him. As he treated Ephraim's slight wound, Newt says, there's a storm coming over there. You can smell it. And that was true. That rain smell had appeared, and Ephraim proceeded to then give Newton a wet willy. They continued on their walk, and Ephraim calls them over to look at something. They look down at the shore and see a ball of moving, twisting, writhing snakes. They ask, what are they doing? Why is there a ball of snakes? Ephraim says, well, that's how they fuck. It's a snake orgy. They all watch in either disgust or confusion. Shelley then tries to push Newt into the ball of snakes, but Kent yells at him to stop, telling him that he might piss his pants, relax. Newt then thanks Kent as they continue, as they watch the mass of writhing snakes. As they all watched, Shelley had wandered off to a tide pool nearby. Shelley had found a crayfish just sitting there, when he began pulling on the limbs of the helpless creature. You see, Shelley was a bit of a toucher, not that way, but he liked to touch things, feel them. Shelley wondered how it would feel to pull the legs off the crayfish. Not to him, but how would it actually feel to pull the legs off? Would the legs just pop off with no force? Would it just take a little pressure? He wondered. He kept popping the thing's eyeballs when Ephraim calls him over to be a windbreak for the fire. They all start the fire, and Ephraim blurts out while they are all quiet, my grandma died of cancer. Liver cancer. It went even more quiet, and Max asked, what? Ephraim says, just listen. Her skin went yellow when her hair fell out due to radiation therapy. When I saw that guy this morning, it reminded me of that. They all agree that they had been thinking about it this whole time. Kent says maybe the guy had, what do you call it, alpines? Newt says, Alzheimer's? No, that's an old people disease. Kent says that his dad says that usually the most obvious answer is the right one. He's just sick. Max then says, Tim's a doctor, right? When they get back, he'll probably have it all sorted out. They kick out the fire and they continue on their trek. The end of this chapter has another document like the last time. This time it's Newt's transcript for his therapist, and this little transcript is my favorite part of the whole book. It's the thing I remember most about it. In this transcript, Newt says that his therapist asked for a confession about anything. It's good for the soul, right? Well, at school, Newt doesn't talk to many people. He's a nerd, a geek, a nerdy fat geek, as he says. So, he always got along more with adults than kids. But online, you could be anyone. That's how it worked, yeah? They couldn't see how you looked, even if you were fat or geeky. Well, a while ago, Newt had this cousin named Sherwood, and he died in a farming accident. A combine ran him over, and as a result, he had a closed casket funeral. Well, Newt and Sherwood were close. Sherwood liked Newt. He never made fun of him like the other kids. But when he visited, Newt took him to out-of-the-way places so no one would even recognize Sherwood and him together. When Newt spoke about things, Sherwood genuinely listened and liked him. And Sherwood was a good-looking dude, a farmer. He had big muscles and he was handsome at that. Then he died. And a light died from Newt's life. Well, a while after he passed, Newt was looking through a box of old Polaroids he took of Sherwood. He got a Polaroid camera one summer and took a bunch of photos of Sherwood to test it out. Besides, Newt didn't like to be photographed himself anyway. Newt then thought he'd put up a memorial wall on Facebook of Sherwood. But somewhere along the way, he got another idea. A shameful one, he knows. But he instead made a person. Alex Markson, he called him. He made a new Facebook account called Alex Markson. He had the looks of Sherwood and the interests and likes and stuff of Newt, like a combination of the two boys. He knows it was wrong and he didn't know why he did it even. It started out slow and he just posted a few things he found interesting as Alex. But then strangely, people started friend requesting him. Like a lot of people. People like Ephraim and Kent and Max. They obviously didn't know it was Newt behind the account, just a normal looking dude with the same interests as Newt. Newt found himself picturing Sherwood in heaven, shaking his head down on Newt, but he couldn't stop. He even got a friend request from a girl in one of his classes he had a crush on named Trudy Denson. Thing is, they all found Sherwood cool, loose, interesting, but not Newt. Even though that they posted the same stuff. It was like what Newt could have been, he figured, if he wasn't him. Newt says his own Facebook page only has like 10 friends, his mom, a pen pal who eventually unfriended him anyway, his uncles and aunts. But here's the confession. Alex Markson isn't even friends with Newt. Because he wouldn't want to be. The next chapter starts out with the boys back at camp, and Tim was tending to the fire. Kent tries to enter the cabin, but Tim stops him, says the man in there is sick like something he's never seen before. At first he thought it was cancer, but cancer usually comes with a loss of appetite. And that guy in there, he's hungry. He ripped apart the sofa and tried to eat it. Nothing like it Tim had ever seen. Kent asks, "What are you going to do about it, Tim?" defiantly. Tim says he's going to try to operate on him. He's not a surgeon, but he knows the basics. Tim turns to Max and asks, "Can you help me out?" Max's dad is a taxidermist, the county coroner as well. Tim asks Max if he's ever helped his dad out with anything like that. Max says, well, he's helped taxidermize small animals, but nothing else. Newt asks Tim, is that really necessary? Tim says that Max doesn't have to help, but Tim doesn't think he can do this alone. A weird voice in Tim's head sprouted up this past day. One that sounded like HAL 9000 from 2001 Space Odyssey, and it rang out in his head, saying, "You need to do this, Tim. There was no other way." Max says he guesses he can help. Tim says they'll take all the necessary precautions so neither of them get sick. The man in there, though, he's viral. He's sick. It's contagious. So he has to be sure Max will be ready for this. And Max says yes, he'll help. Max and Tim walked into the cabin and it looked like Tim had been quite busy. A crude surgery theater had been set up. Tim gave Max a strip of cloth with rubbing alcohol on it. He tells Max to never take that off of his mouth. The air in here was sweet-smelling, and all the wrappers of the food for the weekend were in the trash. Tim then set up a chair under the doorknob. He says he doesn't want the others coming in. Looking at him, Tim had lost about 20 pounds in one day. How was that possible? He also felt he had to be pretty desperate to ask a kid to help him. Tim takes a swig of alcohol and notices Max looking at him. Tim says the alcohol isn't just for him, but for the kids too. Don't worry. Tim gets ready and says he gave that man tons of alcohol. It's not a professional anesthetic, but it'll work, so he doesn't wake up for the surgery. Tim's HAL 9000 voice was taunting him the whole time, while another new voice was taunting him too. Tim lifted up the sheet from the man and Max recoiled. The man looked like what a kid would scribble to draw a person with crayon, like a stick figure. Max thought he looked to be the oldest man he'd ever seen, just skin and bones with weird protrusions all over. Can you save him? Max asks. Tim says he doesn't know. His cartilage is completely disintegrated. It's like some kind of voodoo that he's alive even right now. Tim turns to Max and says he's gonna cut into him now, just a little. Tim looks at Max and says if he yells at him or gets demanding, don't take it personally. It's not gonna be his fault, but he has to be sure right now. Tim thought back to his time in med school. He has to respect the body beneath his blade right now. Tim makes a small incision at the stomach, very slightly, but almost as if the body wanted to be cut open. His skin split apart like butter. He cut open the man's stomach lining and a gray liquid oozed out. But then weirdly, inside his stomach lining was another stomach lining? How's that possible? It's like a Russian nesting doll. Tim argued with the weird voices in his head. How is this possible? When Max called out to Tim over and over, something's coming out of his stomach. Max saw as a weird tube came out of his stomach lining. It reminded Max of an uninflated balloon that a clown might use to make a balloon animal. Tim! Max screamed as he saw the horror. It went in and out of his stomach lining over and over. It reminded Max of that snake ball he saw. Like several different things making up the tube thing. The thing then rocketed out of his body like a bullet, a milky, strange U-magnet-shaped worm. It writhed around and started flopping all over the operating table, squirming all over the room. Max, get back! Tim yelled out. It started squirting brown liquid and Tim fell backwards on his ass and he yelled at Max to cover his mouth. Don't let any of the liquid get on him. Pounds came from the door from Kent. Tim, open this door right fucking now! Tim hoped the man died before all of this happened, so he didn't have to experience the pain and horror of what they were now seeing coming out of him. But as soon as Tim thought that thought, the man woke up and started just making guttural noises. The man then started slowly weakening, getting sleepier. Tim realized he was watching this man die. He'd seen people die before as a doctor, but Max hadn't. Max was reaching for the smoldering iron to kill the worm with it or something. I don't know why this is included and why Max is doing this. But Tim yells out to fucking stop right now. The worm starts then coiling around the dying man's neck, choking him. The two look on in horror as this white worm, which was completely translucent and filled with brown goop. And the only thing visible now was that brown goop from the worm, constricting and killing the man on the operating table. It slowed down, and that brown liquid bubbled from his stomach lining as the man died. Tim reached for the scalpel on the ground after the man was choked out and died and quickly sliced the worm and cut it in twain. There was nothing inside the worm. It cut like a ripe cheese, like cutting through nothing. After it was over, Tim turns to Max and asks, "Did you get anything on you? Anything in you?" Max says no, he kept gauze over his mouth the whole time. Kent was pounding on the door the whole time. Tim goes over and yells, "Kent, move your ass far away from the door right now. We're coming out." "A worm?" Newt asked. "Yes, Newt, a worm." Tim had seen worms before, even tapeworms. He heard that beef tapeworms could get huge, but this was something else. "It killed him?" Ephraim asked. Tim wanted to tell the kids the truth, as what else could he say? "Yeah, it just killed him. It did what worms do and just ate everything that he did. It starved the man from the inside. It took all the nutrients from that he ate, and then some, taking everything from him." "That's amazing," Kent said. Tim wanted to slap the boy. The Hal voice said in his head that he wanted to punch the little fucking prick. The boys asked if the worm stuff touched Max, and Max said no. And Tim said that he just made an incision and it flew out of him like a rocket, and then choked him, killed him right there in front of them. "I was scared," Tim said meekly. "This is no time to be scared, Tim," Kent said. "Fuck off, you pushy little shit," Tim wanted to say, but then he noticed mosquitoes all over the kids. But no mosquitoes had touched him all day. Was this a side effect of whatever he had? Shelley then piped up that he wanted to go home. Please, Scoutmaster, he said. Tim thought it looked like Shelley was mocking him, and he wasn't serious. Tomorrow, I promise, Tim said. Why not tonight, Scoutmaster? Shelley said. The Hal voice in his head said, because I'm too tired tonight, you fucking shit. Kent then piped up that he wants to see the worm. Tim tells him no, but Kent just strode off. Tim found himself too tired to try to stop it. At the end of this chapter, there's a document from Dr. Edgerton's lab. It says it's a study on a guinea pig, literally. It gives timestamps of what happens after this guinea pig was exposed to something. I will read it in full. Test Subject 4, Beta Series, Guinea Pig. Subject's pre-test weight, 1,350 grams. Date, July 19th. 7 a.m. Introduced modified hydatid via injection, between 100 and 250 post-embryonic stage eggs, delivered via liposome vehicle. Subject is alert and energetic. Eyes are clear, evidencing no overt sign of distress or pain. 8 a.m. Subject unchanged. 9 a.m. Subject unchanged. 10 a.m. Subject unchanged. 10:13 a.m. Subject emits a series of squeals. 10:47 a.m. Subject appears disoriented, bumping into bars of its enclosure, emitting distressed squeals at a significantly higher pitch and with increased frequency. 11:07 a.m. Subject is observed chewing the bars of its enclosure. 11:09 a.m. Subject is observed consuming cedar shaving linings within its enclosure. 11:15 a.m. Subject is observed consuming its own fecal matter. 11:22 a.m. Sizable evacuation of larval stage hydatid via excretory tract. 11:41 a.m. Subject emits squeals reaching prolonged high-pitched before ceasing. 11:56 a.m. Subject is observed consuming a portion of its front left paw. Eyes glazed, breathing rapid, onset of bodily torpor. Subject appears either unaware of its action or beyond pain. Bleeding uncontrolled. 12:03 p.m. First gastrointestinal rupture observed. Occurs along transmendenal cleft. Fissure observed, approximately 1/8 inches. Quantity of adolescent stage hydatid worms observed exiting the subject's body. 12:08 p.m. Subject exhibiting signs of late-stage morbidity. Noticeable stiffening of joints, labor breathing, milky film developing on eyes. Subject's mouth opening and closing repeatedly. Appears to be chewing on the air. 12:16 p.m. Second gastrointestinal rupture at 1/2 inch below original fissure. Large quantity of adolescent stage hydatid worms observed extruding from subject's stomach cavity. 12:19 p.m. Subject deceased. 12:22 p.m. Remaining hydatids deceased. Test concludes. Test duration 5 hours and 22 minutes. Subject's post-test weight 490 grams. Total weight loss 860 grams. Kent stormed off and thought that he needed to step up now. Their leader needed to be a strong man, not a pussy. Like his dad said, Tim was just a middle-aged queer, not a pedo, but a soft loser. He imagined his dad telling him to get in there. It was his God-given right. Tim was going to try to cover up this dead body, and he needed to see it. Max called out from behind them that this probably isn't a good idea. All the boys followed Kent, and Tim tried to call out meekly to stop it right now, but Kent ignored him. Max says, at least cover your mouth with gauze due to the infection risk. Kent looks back and says, yeah, good idea, actually. He bashed into the door, and it wasn't anything like he thought he'd see. The dead body wasn't a graceful-looking thing like his grandma's funeral. This man had a graceless death. A purple ring around his neck, brown shit-like liquid coming out of his side. A nauseatingly sweet smell permeated throughout the room. Tim rushed into the room and boomed out that this was the site of a contagion. Kent, if your dad was here with his dick swinging all over the infection site like you are now, he'd end up as dead as that guy on the table right now. Tim shoved Kent to the ground, and Kent weakly said, don't talk about my dad like that. Tim booms out that this is worms. It could be airborne. Shelley asks, then why did he bring Max into this? Why bring any of them into this? The teenagers no longer looked at Tim with respect, but with disdain. Hesitation. Tim felt a sudden wave of nausea and weakness, and he fell to the floor. You're sick, Tim. You've got the worms, Shelley said a little more aggressively now. This had been building in Kent for a while, though. He looks to the other boys and say, they have to quarantine Tim. They have to. Please, Tim says quietly yet strictly. Shelley snickers and Kent smiles at Tim. It was not an innocent smile either. They grab the grown man and throw him in the broom closet. Boys, please, Tim says through tears. They all grab him and push him further down into the closet. Even Newt. Ephraim pushed him down to the floor, and Shelley looked like he was a hyena with lips receded back with a wild look. The boys kept saying to themselves that this is just a game. What they're doing right now? It was almost a mass hysteria of following Kent, and they all followed. But no one said a thing. After they pushed Tim into the closet, Newt asks them all, when can we let him out? Kent says when the boats get here. They'll get here in a day or two anyway. But for now, they let him out no sooner. He's sick. Kent sees a bottle of whiskey on the desk and takes a swig. Just like General Patton is what his dad would say when he took a swig of whiskey. The end document of this chapter describes an interview between a subordinate of Edgerton, a scientist, and an interviewer. He says that Edgerton and him were developing a pill to help weight loss and reverse the aging process of all things. If anything made you skinnier looking or younger looking, the rich would make you rich, is what Edgerton would say. But this subordinate said that Edgerton was not normal. He was a sociopath, a straight-up stereotypical mad scientist almost. Down by the shore, Max sat alone when Newt came up to him. We shouldn't have done that to the scoutmaster, Newt says. Max tiredly just said, they got carried away. It was like a coping mechanism. They were all scared. Newt says he knows, but in a closet? Max thought to a time when some birds were messing up the property value of his house. His dad tried to get them away any way he could for months, but they kept going back. Eventually, his dad went to the hardware store and he found some chicken wire and sealant, so he sealed the pieces of the roof that were torn off by the birds and put up chicken wire. Max returned the next day from school to find a dead daddy bird in the bushes. And later that night, his dad found 3 stillborn eggs and a mommy bird with her broken wing, all caused by his dad's frustration. I just wanted them to find somewhere else to live. I got carried away, his dad said, through tears. Even adults got carried away like they just did. I've never seen a dead body before, Max. Should we let Tim out of the closet? Newt asks Max. Max says Kent is the only one that knows the combination. They both sat on the shore and looked at the mainland. More lights seemed to be around town than normal. Lots of military boats, too. Do you really think a boat will come tomorrow? Newt asks Max. Max just tells him to please shut up. The end of the chapter is a huge break that goes into the Act 2 of the book. The document is a military document saying Falstaff Island has been quarantined until further notice. They say the island is currently unoccupied, but they refuse to state the nature of the quarantine. Tim sat alone in the broom closet. Completely alone. Hungry. He thought to himself, what did he do to deserve this? Invited a sick, helpless stranger onto the island? It didn't matter. He'd forever be known as the scoutmaster who got mutinied by his own troop. That'd make Kent's dad laugh. He had a thin line of lighting coming out from under the closet door that he was locked in. A small comfort. He hopes he didn't infect the boys, though. What if he accidentally spat on them when he was screaming at them? Besides, they touched him and they pushed him in here. He hoped, prayed that he didn't infect them. Another voice, a different one from the one that spoke to him before, is in his head now, as well. Eat, it said. He laughed to himself. What could he eat? There was nothing in here. The voice softly says, anything you can find. Tim looked up at the wallpaper and thought to himself, who wallpapers a closet? But Tim scratched off the wallpaper and it was something he could eat. So he did. A little bit here and a little bit there. The voice slightly quieted down. He then heard singing outside the closet. Who was that? Shelley? Slowly, the bar of light from under his door began disappearing. No! Tim yelled. That was his only solace, that light. It then began getting plugged up, and then he was in complete darkness. Eat, the voice said in his head, no longer soft. He wept quietly, all alone in the dark. Shelley put the roll of tape away, admiring his handiwork. He was just trying not to laugh as he did it. He was excited to do so, though. He didn't know why. He just enjoyed taking away Tim's small amount of light. He understood the danger of being in there with him, as well. He could see the worm eggs hovering around the dead man's body, as well as on the rim of the whiskey bottle that Kent had taken a sip from. Kent was infected too now. He just didn't know it. He wondered what the other boys would say if they saw the tape and the dish towels he put under the door. Would they know it was him? It wouldn't matter. He already had an excuse. He would just say he thought he heard Tim coughing and got scared. That would be logical. He walked out of the cabin and saw a spider web. He took out a lighter that he had on him and burned the edges and watched the flame go up the web and burn the web to a crisp. He had done that sort of thing so much that this hardly excited him anymore, though. His teachers and others would consider Shelley a bit slow. He scored low on IQ tests and got straight C's and a few D's in school. No one looked at him twice. They thought he was just the weird kid who would probably end up working at an oil change place his entire life. But he liked it that way. It made him inconspicuous. The thing he just did with Tim, this was a new form of excitement. Spiders never told on you, but Tim, he was human. It excited Shelley like never before. People didn't know it, but Shelley was smart in a very different way. He was extremely perceptive, and he liked that people didn't look twice at him. And he knew it with his soul that because of the weird military boats and all the lights, that boat was not going to come rescue them tomorrow, or the day after. Who knows when or if it even would. Something was wrong on this island. Shelley liked this, though. It gave him more time to play his games. Maybe he would even be the only one left when the boats eventually did come for them. The boys woke up the next morning and Ephraim was first to notice it. The cooler of food was gone. Ephraim got angry and immediately started accusing people. He was hungry. He started with Newt, naturally because he was fat. Ephraim went straight for him. Max called his best friend down, saying Newt was sleeping next to him all night. If it was Newt that ate it, he would have heard him. Just then, Shelley comes back to the camp, and Ephraim says, "Shelley, where's the cooler?" "Don't know, boss," Shelley said smugly. Ephraim wanted to punch Shelley in the face, but he had a weird feeling that Shelley would like it if he did, and maybe his fist would sink into his placid face like a bowl of oatmeal. Ephraim calmed down and took out a cigarette. He thought back to a time when he saw a construction worker get electrocuted on a telephone pole, and his face almost melted off. He survived, but he was really scary looking. He wondered if Tim could live a normal life after all of this like that guy did. Ephraim counted to 10 and calmed down, just like his mother and his therapist taught him. The end document of the chapter states how this quarantine could have been prevented if Edgerton and his subordinates went straight to the police when Typhoid Tom escaped from their labs. The interviewer asked Edgerton's subordinate why they didn't go straight to the police. The man just says because Edgerton is an obsessive. Notions of right and wrong don't appeal to him. Which, by the way, that absolutely didn't answer the question at all, but the interviewer drops it. The subordinate says they found Typhoid Tom when he was looking for money. He was out of luck. It's amazing what people will do just for a little bit of money, even ruin their lives. A while later, the cooler was discovered down by the ocean. It seemed to have been taken by animals as it looked ripped open and torn apart. Ephraim, who was previously angry all about it, just kicked some sand and said, "Fuck it, the boat will be here soon anyway." Newt had his watch and they all looked at it. 8:23 a.m. The boat was supposed to be here at 8:30. Kent sat on a moss-covered rock nearby, and when he was sure no one was looking, he pinched some of the moss off and ate it. He didn't know why, he was just so hungry. Newt looked over and asked, "Kent, are you okay?" Kent just says, "Fuck off, Newt. Please." He sounded more pleading than mad at Newt this time, though. You see, late last night when he was sure everyone was asleep, Kent was awoken by a hunger in his stomach. Something like he'd never felt before, like a pit that couldn't be filled. He found the cooler of food and ate one hot dog and a Hershey's Kiss. It was just one hot dog, right? Who would miss it? But before he knew it, he was dragging the cooler down by the ocean and stuffing his face, his hunger insatiable. He couldn't stop himself. He darted his eyes around in the early hours of the morning and saw Shelley watching him, motioning for him to just keep going. Enjoy it. So he did. He ripped through the cooler and ate everything in it, his lips stained with chocolate. He felt ashamed and heard his dad in his mind saying that he was a weak-willed man. He returned to camp to see Shelley, who Kent whispered to and said if he says anything, he'll kick the shit out of him. Shelley just says, "Whatever you say." "But Kent, your breath smells like shit. Can't you smell it?" Not even noticing the weirdness of the outburst by Shelley, Kent noticed that he could smell it. It smelled unnaturally sweet. He then went back to bed. Newt looked at his watch again. 9:02 a.m. The boat was supposed to be here almost 45 minutes ago. The man who picked them up was always on time and he was unbelievably punctual. Being this late was really unlike him. Max asked Newt if they could swim, maybe, to which they all agree that there's no way. The currents are too strong and it's miles of open water, and Shelley chimes in that there's sharks there too. Then they all noticed it. A huge thunderhead cloud almost right upon them. They all realized it at once that if they don't get inside, or underground even for that matter, that storm was going to tear right through them. They felt that they might even see a cyclone touching down on the water. They all grab their things and start to move back towards the cabin, not realizing how much danger they truly were in right now. It was a cyclone. As they get close to the cabin, though, Kent stops. He says, he can't go in there. They are sick in there. Ephraim says, last night he was so gung-ho on going in there, and now he doesn't want to, with the storm approaching. Kent says, this whole place is sick. How about you're sick, Kent? Shelley called out. Don't you dare, Shell. Kent replied. Shelley slowly enunciated every word. Last night, Kent went out and took the cooler, ate every last piece of it, then put it by the river. Kent slammed into Shelley, his smiling face looking back at him. Ephraim tells Kent to take a good count of his teeth because if he doesn't get out of their way right now, he was going to feed his teeth to him. Without Kent even having a chance to reply, Ephraim rams his shoulder into Kent, dropping him. Newton yells that they have to get to the cellar now. That storm is right on them. Someone asks, what about the Scoutmaster? Kent drags himself up and says, he's sick. Ephraim looks back and says, you're sick! Tim calls out through the door, I am sick. They all looked over and Max asked under the door, what can they do? Tim says, get some candles and blankets and go down to the cellar. I'm gonna stay right here, though. Max asks why, and Tim replies, you know why, Max. The hopelessness in Tim's voice hit Max's chest like a truck. Tim asks if any of the other boys are sick. Max replies, maybe Kent, who yells, I'm not sick, to which Ephraim just tells him to shut the fuck up again. Just then, blood starts pouring out from under the towels on the floor. Max asks, how's Tim bleeding? Tim says, oh, he didn't even know he was. He's so hungry, Max. He doesn't sound scared or surprised by himself bleeding at all. One last time, Tim says, get to the cellar. The end of the chapter document is, like the last one, a test conducted and transcribed, which I will once again read in full. Evidence Log Case 518C, Piece A17, Personal Effects. Lab Journal of Dr. Clive Edgerton. Recovered from Site A, 220 Marketplace Road, Summerside, Prince Edward Island, by Officer Brian Shelley, badge number 908. Test Subject 13, Alpha Series. Chimpanzee, age 3 years, 7 months, female. Subject's pre-test weight, 105 pounds. Date, September 22nd. Observing researcher Dr. Clive Edgerton. 9 a.m. I introduced a modified hydratid via injection. Subject is alert and energetic, enjoying the use of its large enclosure with a swing bar, reflective mirror, and splash pool. Subject is evidencing no overt signs of distress or pain. 10 a.m. Subject stayed unchanged. 11 a.m. Subject stayed unchanged. 12 p.m. Subject stayed unchanged. 1 p.m. Subject stayed unchanged. 1:54 p.m. Subject displaying signs of agitation, pacing its enclosure. It issues a sign of vocalizations, shrill dog-like yips. 2:13 p.m. Pacing continues. Vocalizations climb to a high and impossibly pain-stricken pitch before softening. Subject is scratching its posterior aggressively, blood observed in small quantities. 3:09 p.m. Subject has consumed all foodstuffs in its enclosure, approximately 5 pounds of peeled and diced fruit, 1 pound of dried mealworms, and 5 pounds of root vegetables, equivalent to 10% of subject's total body mass consumed in less than 45 minutes. 3:10 p.m. Subject failed to masticate food fully. Subject choked on fibrous tubers. Subject regurgitating said tubers. Shortly thereafter, subject consumed them again. 4 p.m. Subject continues to scratch his posterior aggressively. More blood. Half a pint loss? Possible risk of anal fissure. 5 p.m. Scratching has largely stopped. Prominent indentations under the ribs indicate rapid weight loss, although at perhaps a slightly slower rate than registered in both the rodent and feline test subjects. Weight loss still far too rapid to have any practical applications. Visible folds of skin now grid the subject's pelvic brim, eyes sunken into skull, tissue degradation evident, subject's demeanor placid and seemingly unconcerned. Hydratid has narcotizing effect. 5:45 p.m. A large hydratid has extruded from the subject's anus, approximately 7 inches long. Significant tissue damage, swelling and redness evidence at extrusion site. Possible anal prolapse. Subject appears to be in no evident physical pain. Hydratid now approximately 1 foot long as of recording 2, now 2.5 feet. 5:50 p.m. Subject paces enclosure, movement sluggish and hesitant. The extruded worm now 5 feet long. It's trailing from subject anus. Hydratid is thicker towards mid-body, diameter of a medium gauge electrical cord. 5:52 p.m. Hydratid has fully extruded from subject, approximately 10 feet in length. It lies in a collier coil on the bare cement. Subject seemingly unaware it has passed the worm, eyes vacant and glazed, bumping into walls, visibility disoriented. 6:12 p.m. A bloody froth emits from the subject's mouth, thick, creamy lather resembling milk foam. Subject evacuated froth with surprising force, hard enough to get copious quantity of blood simultaneously ejected from subject's nose. Subject is seemingly unaware of trauma. 6:30 p.m. Definite prolapse of anus. Severely hemorrhagic fist-like section of lower colon plainly visible, dark purple in color. Subject exhibiting no signs of distress. 7 p.m. Subject lies down heavily on nest of hay and sleeps. 8 p.m. Subject continues to sleep. Rapid aspiration of breath. 9 p.m. Subject continues to sleep. 10:10 p.m. Subject wakes suddenly, eyes quite wide. The visible white portions are networked with burst blood vessels. Subject is deeply agitated state, clawing at face and body. Subject is gibbering uncontrollably. 10:12 p.m. Subject calm again. Hangs listlessly from playset. 10:14 p.m. Subject sits in play pool, splashes water upon self apathetically. Water tinted red with blood from bodily wounds. Subject appears to be developing skin surface lesions, swelling noted on chest, arms, and legs. 10:16 p.m. Subject pulling off hanks of fur. Subject staring at said hanks in a stunned and remote manner. 10:17. Subject ingested own fur. Subject is tearing off fur from arms, stomach, and neck. Subject ingested more fur. There is blood. Quite a lot of blood. Subject is hissing. I do not believe she is making this noise herself. I believe the worms are making this noise somehow. The subject made her way to the evacuated worm. The subject is holding the worm, flicking it with her tongue. Oh dear God, she's going to do that. Oh no, oh no, oh no. The subject is eating the worm. The subject is shoving the worm into her mouth, force-feeding herself the worm. She's eaten half. She's eaten it all. It's gone. The subject is mewling, drowning kitten sounds. She's mewling and licking still. Her lesions are pulsating. I think I can see... Fuck no. Jesus Christ. 11:23 p.m. Dr. Erickson exits examination booth. Dr. Edgerton re-enters. 11:24 p.m. Lesions appear to be breaking all over the subject's body. Hydratids must have escaped the intestinal walls. They have entered the seams between pockets of subject's muscle strata. They are presently exiting from fissures eaten through the subject's bulging skin. They are smaller than the worm that exited the subject's anus. Thread-like specimens. Several largest specimens are breaking through the flesh's subject's cheeks. 11:32 p.m. Subject drags itself to a standing position. Subject is reeling around, clawing itself. Subject is tearing off swatches of infected flesh. Skull bone visible through subject's left elbow. 11:36 p.m. Subject largely unaware of bodily devastation. Subject is tearing a long strip of flesh off forehead. Eyes nearly white. Cataracts, ocular occlusion, blood running freely. Subject making no sounds to indicate pain or suffering. Methodically peeling flesh. Several white threads can be seen wriggling in a mangled tissue of forehead. 11:40 p.m. Two large hydratids break through the lens sac of the subject's eyes. Worms-infested corneal vaults. 3-inch hydratids, quite thick, protrude from subject's eye sockets, wriggling around rather animatedly. 11:42 p.m. Subject blindly consuming own stripped flesh. 11:47 p.m. Subject immobile. Worms braiding into each other on exterior of subject's bodies. Engaging in procreation. 11:50 p.m. Subject exhales heavily. Chest does not rise again. 11:55 p.m. Subject assumed deceased. Worms continue to exhibit movement, although not so energetic. 12:05 a.m. Exterior worm movement has ceased. Subject's lower abdomen continues to pulse faintly. 12:13 a.m. Large quantity of worms evacuated from subject via anus and mouth. 12:40 a.m. All organisms deceased. Biodecontamination and disposal process initiated. Test concludes. Test duration 15 hours 40 minutes. Subject's post-test weight 44.3 pounds. Total weight loss during test 60.7 pounds. Ephraim, Newt, and Max started grabbing a bunch of candles and stuff to go down to the cellar. Newt looked at the ocean on the way there and saw it was in complete disarray. The cyclone whipping and nay-naying all over the water. It was a serious storm. They all started down into the cellar when Ephraim pointed at Kent and said, "You're not coming with us." They go back and forth for a few minutes until Kent relents. "Please," he says through tears. The first time any of the boys had ever seen him cry. Ephraim says, "No way. You did that to the Scoutmaster? Now we are going to do this to you. It's the same situation." Before he could finish that sentence, though, Kent bull charged into the cellar where Ephraim stopped him, and another fight broke out between the two. Yesterday, they would have been evenly matched, but today, it was pitifully easy for Ephraim to beat Kent. It was almost sad how easy it was. Ephraim knocks Kent to the ground, and as Kent pitifully tries to get back up, Ephraim straddles him and starts wailing on his face, over and over and over. If his mother saw him, she'd say he looked just like his father. He pounded his fists into Kent's face over and over and over, much longer than necessary, to the point where Ephraim's knuckles split open from the beating they were taking. He got up and said, "Kent's not coming with us." Newt looked scared, and Ephraim told him if he wants to stay out with him, so be it. But Max and him, and he guesses Shelley, are going to go down into the cellar to be safe. They all went down to the cellar when Max stood up to Ephraim, right in his face as thunder cracked in the distance. Max says he's not leaving Kent. Just then, something changed. Something that had never happened before. A silent falling out between Ephraim and Max's friendship. "Do you know how stupid you are, Max?" Ephraim said, his face right in Max's. Max, without looking away from Ephraim, says, "Newt, don't lock the cellar door. We're gonna go help Kent." They went back outside the cellar to find Kent lying in the mud. They tell Kent to follow them, and they put him under a tarp. The tarp was filled with wood lice and earwigs. Kent, not having the energy to fight back, just followed. They had to scream to be heard over the howling wind now, and tell Kent to sit under the tarp when they get down to the cellar. Max looks one last time at Kent to see him licking the tarp for earwigs and other bugs. Ephraim went down to the basement as the other two went up to go help Kent. A small piece of him regretted what just happened. He thought about Max. They never fought. Was Ephraim in the wrong? Look where this decision led him. To be alone with fucking Shelley in the cellar. "You were right, you know, about Kent. You get what you deserve, right?" Shelley said to Ephraim. Shelley says that Max and Newt will understand in time. Shelley tells him to just sit down. More of a command than a request. Ephraim does so, and Shelley says, "Now Ephraim will be in charge, like it always should have been." Ephraim wearily says, "I don't care about that." Shelley says, "Sure he doesn't." Shelley then makes a weird noise, and Ephraim asks, What is it?" Shelley says, "Nothing." Ephraim begs, "What is it, Shelley?" Shelley then just says, he thought he saw something under Ephraim's fingernails. It was probably nothing, though. Ephraim looked horrified at Shelley, then pounding came from the door. Ephraim opened up the door and saw the other three. He says, "Fine, Kent can stay in the cellar, but he has to stay under the tarp, alone in the corner." Kent just nodded pathetically. Max then saw Ephraim looking at his split knuckles and Kent's wounds, back and forth. The ending document of this chapter is that same interview with the subordinate, saying that the idea was that this pill was going to have worm eggs in it. It would be like a weight loss drug on steroids, which is dangerous, sure, but these pills would be packaged with a second different pill, one that flushed the worms out of your system after, making a miracle weight loss drug. It worked, but a bit too well. After a couple hours, the wind started to die down. Newt says, after the noise died down, "We should check on the Scoutmaster," he said. They all agreed except for Kent, who was silent. "You okay there, Big K?" Newt asked. Kent just says, "Yeah, never better," with a weak smile. It weighed on all of them. Less than 12 hours ago, Kent was the strongest of them. Now he's shivering under a tarp eating bugs. It looked like he'd lost 20 pounds as well. What was going on? Kent, the man he was destined to become, was ending right in front of them. They all walked out from the cellar except for Kent. Ephraim took a broom and shoved it between the handles of the cellar, locking Kent in there. They all walked into the cabin and Newt called out, "Scoutmaster Tim, are you..." But he never finished the sentence. They all looked in horror as a tree trunk was breaking through the roof into the closet. Tim was absolutely not okay. They could see a cracked eggshell that used to be his skull barely under the tree, blood leaking from underneath. Purple veiny appendages bent like an ant who'd been crushed. "He looks like the Wicked Witch from Wizard of Oz," Shelley says. "Shut the fuck up, Shell," Ephraim said with a hoarse voice on the verge of tears. Newt's heart was aflutter like never before. Is he really... He couldn't say dead. Ephraim said sadly, "It's okay, Newt. I don't think he felt anything. It was quick. He was so sick that he... Should we bury him? Newt asked. But before anyone could answer, Tim's stomach moves. First, it looked like huge legs of a dead spider coming out of his stomach, but then it looked like mouths. It was hundreds of worms spilling out of the break in his stomach. They moved impossibly fast towards the boys, all twisted together like the snake ball. They all run away from the worms as Ephraim freezes and looks at his fists, still bloody from beating Kent. Max could tell what he was thinking. They can get in through there. There was a crazed look in Ephraim's eyes, a look Max had never seen before. Max wondered how it was even possible that no one had come for them yet. Newt's overbearing mother, Kent's dad filled with righteous justice, or the old man that usually picked them up. What was going on? Why was no one coming for them? Back in the cellar, Kent was dreaming as this happened. He imagined his father sitting at the kitchen table and giving him advice, saying, "Pain is just fear leaving the body, son." As he said this, though, his father morphed into a worm, the police uniform sliding down his skinny worm body. "Nobody loves me, and I'm going to the garden to eat you," his worm father said. And then he says, "This is just fear entering your body now." They all came out of the cabin, smelling the wet after rain smell. Newt takes charge and says, "We need to make a list. We need food, water, shelter, and medicine for Kent." Shelley pipes up and says, "Why does that matter? He's just going to end up being like the Scoutmaster." Newt wanted to say, "Fuck off and go sink in the ocean, Shelley," but he didn't. Newt just says they don't know what's going to happen to Kent. Shelley just walks away towards the shore. Newt then says, "Okay, well, we need to make some oars or something to paddle the boat if we can't get it to start." Ephraim sat looking at his knuckles. He just says, "I don't know what to do anymore, guys." Newt says, "It's okay, Ephraim." But Ephraim cuts back, "It's not okay! The Scoutmaster's dead!" His belly split open and worms fell out. Violent worms that chased us out of the cabin. "We just have to stay away from the cabin," Max says. And Shelley comes back, and of course, so's Discord, and says, "It's a disease, right? It spreads. It gets in you somehow." He looks and then cocks his head at Ephraim. "Maybe the military is out there and they won't let us leave. Maybe they'll shoot the boat down before we can," Newt says. "Let's forget about leaving on the boat for now. First, we need food. There's fungi out there that will flush your system out. Maybe we can give it to Kent and he'll just shit the worms out." Just then, they see a small cigarette boat skidding across the water. They all look at it as it slows down and another boat catches up to it. People got off the second boat and onto the first. Then all of a sudden, a fire started on the cigarette boat and it explodes. What the fuck? What's going on? Nothing makes sense anymore, they all think. The boys decide to go find food. There was nothing else to do. But first, before they went into the woods, Newt needed to get his pack and the rope in the cabin. The cabin with the worms in it. As he approached, Newt heard his mother's voice in his head saying, "Don't do this, Newt." His mother was a worrywart. His mother was beautiful, and his father was absent. Even on the boat over to Falstaff Island, as they left, Newt's mother told him not to chase any animals or eat anything funny. It embarrassed him. But Newt steeled his nerves. He had to get his pack. His pack with all the books about what they could eat and what they couldn't, along with some rope. He had to go in. If he didn't, Kent just might die like the Scoutmaster did. Newt walked into the cabin. The roof caved in from the tree that fell. He looked over to Tim's body. The last time he saw his body, the worms crawled out of him. Newt wanted to run. He wanted to hide. He heard strange noises in the cabin like... He thought to himself, what would Alex Markson do right now? WWAMD. The fake person he created was so cool and tough. Newt concluded that Alex Markson would certainly run away because he's sane. Newt then creeped along the wall of the cabin and then once again heard the... Newt cried a little and bile rose in his throat. "Newt, you okay in there?" Max called out. Newt thought to himself that he could run away right now. He was a kid, and what could a kid do if not run away from his problems? But there were no adults here. He had to be the adult now. He quickly grabbed a sleeping bag and concluded it was safe as long as he put it over his head. He looked down and heard the again. Now the voice in his head was no longer his mother's, but a pure dark voice of survival. It told him to get out. Now, now, now. But he couldn't. He looked down and saw the Scoutmaster's arm twisted to a weird angle, and he found his knapsack. He grabbed it. It looked undamaged, maybe a little waterlogged, but he now had to get out of this cabin now before the worms got to him. He ran out of the door. He came in. The document at the end of this chapter describes how 2 men were arrested on the water north of their town. Reginald Kirkwood and Jeffrey Jenks were arrested after stealing a cigarette boat and trying to drive to Falstaff Island during the quarantine. They were the fathers of Kent Jenks and Maximilian Kirkwood. 3 other boys are thought to be alive on the island as well. The press reached out to the military for comment, but got no answer. The 3 boys left that afternoon, Max, Ephraim, and Newt. They left Kent where he was, shivering under a tarp in the cellar. It looked like his body was melting into the darkness, but there was nothing they could do for him. Shelley was just straight up missing as well. They called out his name a few times, but they half-heartedly just said, oh well, when he didn't come with them. They decided to go on the trip without either Kent or Shelley. Besides, Ephraim and Max almost had a newfound respect for Newt. Not enough to stop making fun of him, but a little respect for him. How could they not after he escaped the worm cabin after doing the thing he set out to do? Neither of them ever wanted to go back in that cabin, so the fact that Newt did and got what he needed was a surprise. They traveled down the shoreline and Ephraim peeled a piece of seaweed off a rock and looked at it inquisitively at Newt. Newt says, yeah, it's edible. Ephraim takes a bite out of the seaweed and almost immediately spits it out. Newt laughs and says, I said it was edible, I didn't say it was any good. Max then did the same and said, actually, the seaweed's not that bad. It's like a salty, wet chip, which sounds disgusting, by the way. Ephraim says, whatever, I'm hungry enough to eat a bear's asshole. Soon after, though, Ephraim lapses into a weird silence. Max asks, are you okay? And he says, no. He's just felt weird this past couple hours. Max says they all have. They all wander around a bit and they find a prairie, but they find some holes that birds have made in the ground. Newt says it's not even worth trying to build traps for the birds. They're too small. They then see a thing of eggs down on a ledge, but they decide it's not worth the risk trying to climb down it. They then stumble across a tree. Newt cracks off a piece of bark and sees little worms underneath. Grubs, he says. Newt reads in his survival book that they're edible and they taste like almonds. Max says he double dog dares Newt to eat one. Newt does so and he chews into it with a noticeable squelch. Newt cries out, it doesn't taste like almonds at all. Max and Ephraim then laugh at him. Ephraim says he can't believe Newt just did that as he wipes a tear from his cheek. At least I'm trying, Ephraim. Do you see a Burger King around here? Newt asks. Personally, I'd take the grub over the Burger King. That shit's nasty. Shelley waited for the other boys to get pretty far away before he started his games. As they left, Shelley wondered what it would be like if Newt got the worms. Newt was fat. Would his skin sag like a sharp hay? Not much excited Shelley anymore. But today, oh today there was plenty. The county's Mr. Popular lied right down there in the cellar. They were going to have such fun together. He probably didn't have this much fun since he killed Trixie, a kitten his mother had brought home. You see, Shelley was intrigued by the thought of death, though he really didn't think of things actually dying. The things that he killed were empty in his head. NPCs, essentially. He started with bugs. He found 2 rhino beetles, and he put them in a box to starve them. He was delighted to see after a few days that one of them was devouring the other like a cannibal. He then lit the box on fire and listened as the rhino beetle's insides popped like popcorn. Later, he would find mice in glue traps and put borax on their eyes. But unlike humans, animals adapted. They wouldn't cry out in pain, they would just think, oh, I'm blind now, and go about their lives. Then finally, one night when his parents weren't home, Shelley was eating at their dinner table when Trixie the kitten clawed up on his lap. Shelley carried the kitten upstairs, it purring in his arms the whole way, just happy to be alive. He sat the poor kitten on the toilet, and it needed its paws on it. Shelley heard that this was a separation anxiety thing for them, as if the toilet seat would produce milk for it. Poor thing, Shelley thought. He put on some cleaning gloves and grabbed a bottle of Ajax. He put Trixie on the bathtub edge, and then she looked up at him with big yellow eyes. Shelley thought that's the good thing about animals. They don't realize that sometimes the hand that feeds them might just hurt them. Scout Law number 8. Scouts are friends to all animals, right? He thought. He fiddled with his pants, touching his privates as he did, and he shoved Trixie down into the bathwater. The cat tried to struggle, and struggled hard, but Shelley shoved the kitten down harder by its neck. It struggled for a bit, but then went limp. Shelley let go of the kitten and it sprang back to life. It looked at him with painfully confused eyes, and Shelley shoved it under for some more time. For a second, he considered sparing Trixie the kitten as he played with himself. He thought maybe it would break the thing's mind. It might end up like the boy in school who almost drowned and now can hardly move around and just says hi, hi, hi to everybody. A broken mental state. But ultimately, he decides to kill the kitten anyway. He put the body of the poor kitten in a trash bag and decided to burn it. This was the first time Shelley killed something that might be missed. His mother was horrified and sad after Trixie went missing, but she would say to Shelley, "Poor thing must have run away," and shot him a not quite accusatory glance, but questioning. She felt like Shelley had changed. Something replaced her son, but nothing was different about him. It was just a feeling she had. About a week after Trixie died, Shelley lay in bed one night and thought about it, playing with himself. But it was less exciting now. He wondered if it would be more exciting if he did it with something bigger, more intelligent. Shelley went down to the cabin and looked in the cellar. Spindly fingers reached out of the cracks. Yellow eyes looked at him from within. Trixie's eyes, almost. "Oh, Kent," he said. He asked Kent if he thought he deserved to be in there. "I don't know," Kent replied weakly, like an old man almost. "Hey," Shelley said and sprang a look into the cellar. "The Scoutmaster died pretty badly. A tree fell on his head. It's your fault, Kent. Don't you think you deserve to be in here?" Kent just softly replies, "Yes." Shelley then lies and says, "Actually, that helicopter they saw? It dropped them a care package with tons of food. Do you want some, Kent?" he asks. Kent says, "Yes," softly. He's so hungry. "Bring him meat, please." Shelley left and returned with a bunch of dead dragonflies he found on the wall outside. "Here you go, Kent. It's peanut brittle." He puts his hand up to the cellar like a petting zoo, and Kent anxiously grabbed it all and ate it without question. "More," he said softly. Shelley says, "That's all, Kent." "But what's it feel like?" he asks. Kent says he feels empty, like a hole in his stomach, and he wants to do nothing but consume everything, even the other boys. Kent sounded nuts, Shelley thought. He returned to the cabin and saw the dead man lying on the floor, the crusty, dead, dissected worm next to him. Shelley then had an idea. He brought Kent the body of the worm, and he eagerly sucked it up like spaghetti. "More," Kent said. Shelley said, "That's all, Kent." He ate it all. What a pig. Kent begs, pleads for him to come back with meat. Shelley left and thought about his other plaything now, Ephraim. He saw earlier those worms and how Ephraim looked at his knuckles, and he had an idea on how he could convince Ephraim that he was infected. He then said he saw something in his knuckles. He obviously didn't, but he knew it would drive Ephraim crazy. After all, how can you fight a murderer under your own skin? Shelley took out his walkie-talkie and got to work. Around noon, the party of 3 boys got to a copse of trees. Fun fact, I learned the word copse from Dark Souls 2. When they got to the copse, Ephraim sat down tiredly on a rock and just said, "That's it, I'm done walking." Dude looked at him and said, "Come on, you can't just stay here, we gotta find food." "I'm not hungry," Ephraim said. He just looked at his knuckles and quietly asked, "Do you see anything?" Max asked, "What?" Ephraim just says, "Never mind. Would you rather go find food or sit on the rock doing nothing and pout?" Max said. Ephraim took some offense to this, and he immediately balled up his fist and uppercuts Max in the jaw. But he didn't give it his all. It was like a soft uppercut. It didn't hit Max too hard, but enough to slam his jaw shut. Ephraim immediately sat back down and apologized. Max got up, never being punched before, saying, "It's okay." Ephraim puts his head in his hand and says, "No, it's not." Newt turns to Max and says they have to get going. Ephraim's not going to move. Max asks if he'll stay here. Ephraim says yes. He's not going to move. Ephraim squeezed his wounds around his knuckles. Somehow he knew they were in him. Shelley's words drilled into his head. He knew the worms were in him. Ephraim thought about how they all saw the worms chase them in the cabin after they came out of him. No one tried to save him. Everyone just tried to run and save themselves. Scout law number 2. A scout is loyal to his other scouts. Yet all of them just tried to save themselves. But could he blame them? He didn't try to save them either. Ephraim thought about how they were inside him right now. Becoming more than one, procreating under his skin. He could feel it. He talked to himself as if the worms could hear him. He says, "You guys can share my body if you have to, please. Don't do what you did to Scoutmaster Tim to me. Maybe you guys can't help it. I understand. I have control issues too, but don't eat me whatever you do." He screams to himself, trying to reason with worms. How dumb, he thinks. Just then a crackle comes from his pack. "Ephraim?" Shelley rang out from the walkie-talkie. He says, "You guys left me." Ephraim opens his pack and grabs the walkie-talkie. He says they couldn't find him, so they just left, yeah. Max and Newt left him, though, now, too. Shelley says, "Real friends wouldn't have left you, Eph." Ephraim asks if Shelley would have left him. Shelley laughs and says, "Well, I'm not your real friend, am I?" Ephraim thought about it, and yeah, Shelley was something else. People at school called him the Toucher. Shelley then says, "I can help you, Eph." Shelley then says something so honeyed, so alluring, that it made so much sense to Ephraim. It all made sense. "Are you gonna do it, Eph?" he says over the walkie-talkie. Ephraim shushed him and took out his Swiss Army knife. He then plunges the knife into his own knuckles. It had a dull pain as he slid it across his knuckles. He could hear the worms squirming in his head. He was sure of it. "Do you see them yet?" Shelley asks. Ephraim could swear he might see them in his knuckle wound. He tries to pull out a fresh wound like a fishing line, trying to scrape the worms out. The noise of the worms were maddeningly loud to him now. He then takes out a corkscrew attachment from his Swiss Army knife and shoves it in his own ear. He has to get them out. The brain actually doesn't have any pain receptors, he thought. So he digs a little deeper in his ear and Shelley cracks over the radio, "Would you rather deal with a little pain now or die to the worms?" His words made too much sense. A ringing noise in his ears replaced the sound of the worms, and he took the corkscrew out of his ear and put it down. He all of a sudden got really sleepy and could no longer hear Shelley's voice. He missed it already. A misty vacancy across his eyes appeared, and he thought about Shelley's words again. "Would you rather..." Max and Newt walked for a while until they found a blueberry bush. They ate a bit, and Newt thought about how his mother once said that you don't really know a person until you've seen them in a crisis. They then find some mushrooms that Newt said give you the shits. They take them with the intention of giving them to Kent back at camp. Newt started describing the wildlife, and then Max asked, "How does it feel to carry around that big-ass brain all day?" He said it as a compliment, but Newt finally snaps after all the torment that's given to him. He turns away, and Max says it looks like Newt was about to cry. Max had never even seen him cry, even after the worst of teasings. This was getting to him. Newt then goes into a tirade about how, so what? He's fat. So what? He's smart, and people like to pick on him. All of this stuff makes him an easy sacrificial lamb to be made fun of. He was almost dead as a kid because he was so skinny, and now people make fun of him for the opposite. Real funny, right? Max had never heard Newt get so aggressive to anyone. Max backs off and says, "He really didn't mean it. Sorry." Newt says, "Just forget it." They continue to try to make a trap, but realize the trap they are trying to make was a wolf trap, and it won't catch anything small enough to eat. They then walk on until they find a cliff that looks over a beach, and they see it. A turtle. They sneak down to the beach, and Max looks at Newt as if he's asking, "Can we eat it?" Newt says, "Yeah, we can eat it." Max asks, "How are they going to do it?" Newt says they're going to have to go quick, take their knives, and kill it really fast. The two boys went into the water, and the turtle just swam up to them. Maybe it was curious. Maybe it was hungry too. It swam up to Newt, and in the cold water, he thought the thing might snip at his legs. The creature was beautiful. It had a brown shell and beautiful gold eyes. Max tries to grab the shell, and it sort of just slips out of his hands like a slick rock. It then sort of realized it was in danger, and it slapped hard to get away in the water. Max yelled for Newt to grab it, and Newt waddled in the water over to it in the tide pool. They both catch up to the turtle, and each of them grab a flipper and drag it out of the water. They get it to land, and now it's immobile. Max says they should build a fire, and Newt says, well, they have to kill it first. Turtle then snips at Max's toe, and he's so filled with adrenaline and triumph that he hardly even noticed. But when he did, he realized that he got snipped pretty bad by it, and he got angry. He wanted this thing dead. Max placed a piece of driftwood under the turtle and flipped the turtle on its back. He was going to kill this thing. Max had never killed anything before, so he didn't know what to expect. Max took out a knife and dug into the turtle. The turtle muled, and then they took a leather tool that was like a hole puncher, and they kept punching holes in the small turtle. They had to kill it, as it was struggling and clinging to life. They hole punched this poor turtle over and over and over. Blood flows out from the holes. They're hungry and filled with adrenaline and anger. Max didn't realize, but in the rage of trying to kill this turtle, he started crying. "Please, won't you just die?" Max said. On TV, it was easy. A guy would get shot and then just fall over and die. In the real world here, the turtle awkwardly clung to life. Max breaks down and begs Newt, "Just please do it. Please, he can't kill it." Newt grabs its head and starts slicing at its neck. WWAMD, right? Certainly not this, Newt thinks. Finally, it dies. They both bumble, crying, saying they're not hungry anymore. They cry there for a minute in the turtle and then bury it in the sand, saying it wasn't like this in the movies. If they knew that killing something was like this, they wouldn't have done it. It was horrible. They weren't hungry anymore. "Ephraim?" the walkie-talkie said as the blade slipped out of his hand. He knew he saw it then, around his ankle, where he cut the crescent-shaped slice. He saw it. He knew he saw it. He felt it. A pulsing. The worm had to be there. Ephraim took the walkie-talkie and said, "Shell?" To which he replied, "Been here the whole time, friend. You get it?" Ephraim grabbed the slit on his ankle and he reached in and felt it. He know he did. An al dente feeling worm that split into 4 heads. He grabbed it with his fingers and it felt cold. Everything did. He wanted to rip the thing out. It might kill him, but at least he'd die empty. He'd die alone, no, he thought. He grabbed at the thing he thought was the worm and he felt it wriggling. At least he thought he did. Then it slips from his fingers and he loses it. "It got away, Shell," he slurred. The walkie-talkie replied, "So that's it? Are you gonna try again, or are you gonna be a baby like everybody says?" Ephraim steals his nerves. Who says that about him? He bites down and goes back down in. He thought to himself again, what would you rather? The end of the chapter is an interview with Jeff Jenks, Kent's father. He's described as having lost a considerable amount of weight after the Falstaff Island incident. People would say that he seems smaller after as well. In the interview, he said it was the hardest thing he'd ever have to do. He stole that cigarette boat, yes he did, but any parent would do the same. When the military police caught up to the boat and beat him and Max's father so hard that they almost died and their skin split open from blunt weaponry, he felt he'd never been beaten like that any day as a cop. He was never beaten like that. He was never even hurt like that before. All his years as a cop, he had never been hurt like that. But he knows one thing. Kent, his son, was a survivor. Any son of Jeff Jenks would be. However, the official story is that no one knows what happened to Kent Jenks. Kent awoke different from before. Strong, alert. Before he felt so weak, so tired, abandoned like a whipped dog. But whatever Shelley gave him after the peanut brittle, it made him feel stronger, like 1,000 snakes on frictionless sand. He had to punish Shelley though. He was promised meat and Shelley didn't give it to him. Shelley lied. Kent rose and felt new bones growing on his back, pushing apart tendons and muscle. Was this how a god felt? He felt like a butterfly awakening from its cocoon. New strength shot through him. He had to punish Shelley. Shelley sat by the campfire and just decided he had to kill Kent. He had too many irons in the fire right now. He had to get rid of one of them. He went to the cabin and opened the cellar door and he saw Kent in the back of it. Or something that looked like Kent. A thin, emaciated skeleton of a man. His skin looking loose and weird. Boils and pustules lined his back. Kent arose a new crowned king, he felt. He felt the power coursing through his veins. He had eaten God and become him. "What are you looking at?" Kent slurred. He only had one tooth still in place. The others had fallen apart, but stayed in his mouth due to his braces. "Not much," Shelley said. Shelley had taken a dead fish from earlier on the sand and brought it with him, goading Kent to follow him, baiting him. Kent did so, and Shelley threw it on the shore, near the ocean after the long walk. "Thank you," Kent slurred. Shelley petted the Kent thing, and a piece of scalp with hair came off as he did. Shelley, aroused by what was going on. He loved the fact that he was this close in proximity to something so dangerous, and he was going to kill it. He was going to kill his old friend. Shelley then said, "What are you, Kent? Show me." Kent turned around and smiled at Shelley, his head lower than his shoulders. Shelley grabbed the Kent thing's head and pushed him near the water's edge, showing Kent what he was. All at once, Kent's delusions of grandeur shattered. He saw what he was. Shelley then said once again, "Show me," and he dunked the Kent thing's head underwater. It struggled hard for a second, but seemed to lose strength fast. "Show me," Shelley said again as he continued to drown the Kent thing. "Show me!" he shouted as Kent went limp and fell back and looked at the sky. The reality then set into Kent. This was it. This night sky was beautiful, though, like a blanket with holes punched in it. He would never kiss a girl. He would never be the star quarterback in high school. He would never live to see his 15th birthday. His dad was wrong. God didn't look over kids after all. A horrified expression crossed Kent's face, and then Shelley put his head back under, hoping to keep his face like that. But within seconds, it was over. The Kent thing had died. It was no longer Kent, as the dead relinquished their names. It looked peaceful in death. Shelley was angry, so angry for reasons he couldn't describe. He expected to feel something much more. Shelley left, and as he did, thousands of worms exited Kent's body, wriggling around in the water. In the dark water in the dead of night, Shelley saw them slightly and thought they were a sunfish. "Here, fishy," he said as he jumped in the water. Only then, he realized his mistake. He felt slight pinpricks all around his arms, thousands, perhaps millions of little worms feasting and devouring each other. Shelley screamed and ran to shore as Kent's body floated away, the moonlight illuminating him as he did. Shelley got back to the shore after that excruciating experience. He looked at his walkie-talkie and thought he could continue with Ephraim. After all, this was it anyway now. He'd gotten carried away, only for a second, and it was in that 1 second that he let his guard down. He finally is going to lose everything. He laughed like a seagull and started singing to himself. His stomach was grumbling. He sat up for hours that night, motionless, staring into the fire. Along the shore a couple miles away, Newt and Max were building a fire. They didn't say a word to each other after that for hours. They'd stripped down to their underwear and sat near the fire to warm up. "You think it went to heaven?" Newt finally said. "I guess. I mean, what would the turtle have done not to go to heaven?" Max said. "What about Scoutmaster Tim?" Newt asked. Max says he doesn't know. He was a doctor, right? He helped people. He probably is watching from above. Yeah, he's in heaven. They both confided in each other that they'd never seen a dead body before a couple days ago. As they sat there listening to the cracks of the fire, they heard something else. It was cracks, but not the fire. They looked around and saw it. "Oh my God," Max said. A bunch of little turtle eggs sitting in the sand. They killed the mother. They rushed down to the sand and saw the little things exiting the eggs, hatching, like the movie we covered. They quickly helped the turtles to the water as they did. Birds tried to swoop down to eat them, but Max rushed over the babies and covered them with his body so they could get further into the water. He got out of the water, and he and Newt looked at each other, saying sadly, "Our good deed for the day." The end document of this one is a pretty long dossier and interview of Edgerton, pretty much amounting him to being an honest-to-God sociopath. The interviewer says that he has striking green eyes, and he looks like someone that you wouldn't expect to be a mad scientist. Edgerton was tall, he had broad shoulders, bald, he was just a big man. Edgerton asks the interviewer if he knows of the Asian killer wasp, the only animal that murders for fun. The interviewer asks if Edgerton is as interested in these wasps as he is worms. Edgerton says, "Oh, no. He likes worms better." But then Edgerton asks the interviewer How would you rather die? An axe that kills you in an instant, but it's painful, or little pinpricks that last for days that don't hurt as bad, but they kill you very slowly? Edgerton says he'd rather have the axe. Then finally, Edgerton asks the interviewer if he knows the easiest way to transmit a disease or parasite. The interviewer says no. Edgerton says it's love. The human need to care for others, and the weak will always get that person in turn killed for doing so, whether it be by a disease or something else. The third act begins with an ad for a weight loss drug, a 2-pill plan. Perhaps what the pill would have been if the pill went to drugstores. Which, by the way, with very, very slight spoilers here, this ad makes no sense. Because one, as far as we know, this drug was never even made. And two, this is ever so slight of a spoiler, but this was never going to be a drug in the first place, even if the subordinate earlier thought it was going to be. But anyway, next chapter. Shelley went back to the cabin, singing to himself the whole time. If anyone could hear him, they'd think he was crazy. Shelley, more so than the other boys, was a realist. He knew what was going to happen. He could hear the worms inside himself. It sounded like a guy with Vaseline on his hand and a rope slipping through it, which is quite a strange description. Shelley used to be called the Toucher at school. He would get in trouble for feeling girls' hair. It wasn't a sexual thing, but he just wanted to see how it felt. They would look at him with disgust after they caught him, and then just uneasiness. Shelley sat in the cabin with the worms coursing through him. The worms working their way up his body. Near his spine, he felt. He cried to himself. But all of a sudden, a calming warmth. And then he fell asleep. Shelley had dreams of shifting browns, shifting greens, weird, strange feelings. He awoke aroused and felt it was time to eat. Newt and Max wake and both agree that they have to go find Ephraim now. Neither of them slept well, and they can't even think about what happened to Ephraim while they were sleeping. And they both say maybe he went back to camp. When they rounded the bend to see him, Max called out for Ephraim when he saw him. At first, they thought he'd been murdered. But Max saw in his hand a Swiss Army knife that he used on himself. Cuts deep into his ankle, side, ear, and hands. "Who did this?" Newt screamed. Max simply said, "Himself. He did this." Ephraim fluttered to consciousness and he said, "They're inside me. I couldn't get them out. They're sneaky." They then noticed the cut on Ephraim's cheek, a cut down from his ear to his mouth. His tongue flicked through it sometimes as he caught his breath. "They aren't in you, man," Max said. "Wrong," Ephraim replied. Max and Newt tried to convince him, saying he doesn't look any lighter or skinnier, maybe slightly, but he's definitely not infected. Max sees the walkie-talkie and asks, "Who have you been talking to?" Ephraim just laughs and deliriously says, "A little birdie." Max asks, what can they do for him? Panicking, Ephraim says, "Cut them out of me. Newt has a longer knife than me." Max says, "No way." And Ephraim venomously spits out, "Pussy." Max then thought of a plan. Just go along with it so they can bring him back to camp and help him. Max says he can bring him back to camp and they'll cut him open there. Newt chimes in that he actually found mushrooms that'll make you poop yourself and throw up. Maybe they can flush the worms out instead, too. Ephraim looks up and says, "You think?" They got him on board. Ephraim shuts his eyes, and Max thinks how his veins on his eyes looked like worms, though. It took about 3 hours to get him back to camp, dragging them on their backs or on the ground. They got back to camp, and both Shelley and Kent were missing. They look at the cellar, and it's broken open. The fact that Shelley isn't there is almost a relief, more than a concern as well. Newt asks if Max thinks that something happened, to which Max says something had to have, obviously. They look around and they wonder if Kent tried to swim back to shore. That's the only thing they can think of. He must have. They can't picture him doing anything else. Newt then goes into a long dialogue about fear, and how about you really don't know how much mental duress that you can take until you're at that breaking point. Newt figures that adults break mentally easily because the fears they usually deal with are mortgages or car problems or relationships or families. Kids are afraid of slimy clowns and monsters. They expect everything. So they can deal with things when they expect it. When adults see something unnatural, they'll break easier. The documents at the end of this chapter explains a lot about the lore of the world and more about the worm pill. The subordinate of Edgerton is asked if they received outside funding for this research, other than basic pharmaceutical companies, to which the subordinate says no. The interviewer says that he went through the finances of the lab that he worked for, and actually there was another source of funding. In fact, a military research fund, implying heavily that the military was funding this worm as a bioweapon. Shelley waited until Newt and Max left for a bit when he climbed out of that cellar. They didn't see him down there. He sat in the darkness. It suited him now. He climbed out and looked around and found Ephraim on the picnic table. Shelley, being the toucher he is, takes a finger and sticks it in the slit in Ephraim's face, the gash on his cheek. Ephraim wakes up and painfully asks, "Shell? You don't look so hot." Shelley supposes he didn't, but he looked at Ephraim and he looked worse at this moment. His eyes had become yellow, the madness infecting his eyes. Ephraim asks if Shelley can see the worm in him, to which Shelley lies, saying, "Yes. He saw it just now, swimming around his eyes." Ephraim says he can't do it, he can't reach the worm, it's sneaky. Ephraim asks if Shelley has a knife. Shelley says, "Oh yes, a 5-inch buck knife actually, way longer than the scout limit." Ephraim begs Shelley to get rid of the worm, to which Shelley has to stop himself from giggling. He says he will, just because they're friends. Shelley pulls his knife up to his face and slowly slices near his ear. Ephraim asks, "Did he see the worm there?" Shelley says, "Oh yes." Ephraim cries and begs, "Please get it out of me, Shell, please." Shelley slices around his hairline, and Ephraim just cries and says, "Thank you, thank you." Shelley wondered if he could pull his scalp off like the natives used to. Just then, Shelley has an idea. Shelley tells Ephraim that it is sneaky, you're right, but he has an idea. He goes over to the generator and finds a gas can. He brings it back and tells Ephraim that he can't reach it. He's gonna have to burn it out. Ephraim swallows and agrees. Ephraim offers Shelley his lighter and begs to burn it out. Shelley says he will, just because Ephraim is his very best friend. Ephraim thanks Shelley and says he's the only one that gets it. When Max and Newt return to camp, they see it. A giant cone of fire on the picnic table. Ephraim's on fire, they both immediately thought. Max ran inside and grabbed a sleeping bag and sort of beat the fire out of him. It was too late, however. Was it ever not too late? "Where the hell is Shelley?" Max yelled, almost immediately clocking what happened. Shelley appeared just then, and Max and Newt immediately noticed how strange Shelley looked. They thought it looked like there was a zipper down his back and someone had unzipped Shelley and another person had stepped in. "Where were you?" Max yelled, his eyes twitching. Shelley just says, "Oh, no place special." Max ran to Shelley, his hand wraps around his throat. Newt screams out, "Don't, Max, he's got the worms." Max had never been in a fight before, but in that instant, it wasn't a fight to Max. He was gonna kill Shelley. As he does, a flash of silver appears before he knows it. Max looks down and sees a knife sticking out of his stomach. He thought to himself, that doesn't belong there. He struggled with his own mind, thinking, it hasn't gotten this bad, has it? Shelley flexes his arm and sticks it further in, but not far enough in to be a killing blow, just enough to get him off him. Before anything else, though, a big wooden stick smacks Shelley on the back of the head, and his arm retracts. Newt apologizes to Max and says if he didn't do that, Shelley would have killed him. Shelley got up after this and just maniacally says, "I'm gonna kill you. I'm gonna kill you both." He spat on the ground and the two other boys looked at his spit and it was squirming, moving. Newt tries to help and say he's got some mushrooms, he can shit out the worms maybe. Shelley didn't want to hear any of it. He kept spitting and spitting. Max felt the wound in his stomach and he figured that Shelley was going to keep spitting until he hit them. Max fell to the ground over and over by the campfire. He quickly picked up a decent-sized rock and quickly chucks it hard and hits Shelley's knee right on the mark. Shelley folded on the ground. "Next one will hit your fucking face, Shell." Shelley hissed. Actually hissed like a vampire or a cat. He squirmed away unnaturally fast into the woods. Faster than they could catch. The two boys then looked at Ephraim. Max suggested they should bury him. And Newt agreed. They start to dig a hole and bury Ephraim, and they say a prayer over him. By the way, Max still has a wound in his stomach, and that's never really mentioned again. Max could hardly fathom how Ephraim was dead. He just wanted to cry. His forever friend. He wanted to cry just to release the pressure in his chest over all that's happened. He and Ephraim just raced across the monkey bars a week ago. They talked about Batman and James Bond. They were forever friends. Max curled up in a ball right next to Ephraim's grave, just to be next to him one last time. He quickly fell asleep. Eat! 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 Shelley woke up after running into the dark woods and falling asleep. The two kids thought he was sick, but they were wrong. He was a flower blooming for the first time this night. Eat! His babies were inside him. He was worried Max had hurt them somehow, but no. They were still inside, safe, but they were hungry. Eat! Shelley clawed bark off of a rotten tree and ate the bark. Eat more. He ate so much that his stomach swelled up like a gourd. Eat! He looked at himself in the water like a mirror. He looked like a skin suit. Pieces of flesh protruded at weird angles out of his skin. He felt tired, though. Feeding all of these mouths were tiring. He squirmed back to the campfire that night, though. He saw Newt by the campfire still awake. He couldn't kill them right now, but he really wanted to eat them. A small voice in Shelley's head says, "This isn't you. The worms are eating you alive." But Shelley shut out these thoughts and let a warm acid wash them away. Newt looks at Shelley. He sees him and says, "I see you, Shelley." Newt takes out a knife, and Shelley thought to himself that he has to kill them. But he's so hungry right now. He can't. He's too weak. Shelley slithered away, and as he did, his engorged stomach hit the edge of the cabin, and he felt it might burst like a balloon, but he continued on. He went back to the woods, and he could hardly even remember what happened. Just flashes. Him eating a log, him eating eggs, termite eggs, he thinks, him eating anything he could, a rock even. He settled down somewhere dark. He was going to be the best daddy. The end of this chapter is a document from a naval admiral. It is an interview with him, and the interviewer questions him about how this infection got so out of hand on the island. And the admiral is very cold about everything. He says he knew the kids were there, but he had orders not to help them no matter what. He had orders that nothing went to that island. No food or anything. Nothing left that island either. Meaning if a bird flew away from the island, he had a sniper shoot it. This contagion could be airborne, waterborne, anything. Nothing got to that island and nothing left, no matter what. Newt shook him hard. Max, you're screaming. Max woke up from Newt screaming at him, saying that he was screaming in his sleep, and they decided to go down to the shore. Just use the boat and get out of there. They get to the boat and try to leave, cut their losses. They get there, and Newt tries to pull the ripcord for the boat to start it like a lawnmower. He kept pulling the ripcord and pulling it some more, getting emotional as he did. Max didn't say anything as Newt let out his pent-up emotions. Newt just trailed off and cried, and Max just let him. Newt fell to the ground, and he wiped his nose on his sleeve and apologized. "I'm sorry, Max, that wasn't very cool of me. WWAMD, right? He wouldn't cry here." Max replies, "I don't know what that means, but I don't think being cool matters to you, does it?" Newt says he guesses not. They look around the boat to see the problem, and they see 2 holes of something missing. Max says it's the spark plugs. The guy that came to this island must have eaten him. Stranger. He saw something metal in his stomach when Tim operated, he's sure of it, but he didn't know what it was at the time. Newt asks if he's sure, and Max says yeah, he's positive. They go back to the cabin and they look at the dead guy. They try not to pay attention to the man, as his limbs were twisted in weird angles, his elbows and knees eaten away. Newt asks Max if he thinks all the worms are dead now. Max says yeah, probably. Tim says once the host dies, the worms don't last too long after, especially not after several days. Max checks the dead man's wrist and sees he's cold. They look at him and look inside of his stomach. His insides have liquefied like a rotten banana. They put on gloves and dig into him. They find the first spark plug pretty easy. It takes a bit, but they eventually find the second one too. A miracle. For the first time in days, they feel something new. Hope. They were so excited they didn't even take off the gloves as they went down to the shore. Newt asks if they should just plug them in like that, all covered in bodily fluids and waste. Max says, why not? Newt says it actually might mess up the boat. Just clean them off in the water to be safe. The marine standard after all, waterproof. They agree and they do so, and after they wash them off, Newt puts them on the rock to dry. A very standoutish rock so he wouldn't forget where they were. The gas in the boat was nearly empty though. So they went back down to the cellar to get the emergency gas can, which was still full surprisingly. But when they got to the cellar, they noticed it was eerily clean. God, Kent must have eaten everything down here, including the cobwebs. They returned to the boat to see just a wet spot on the rock where the spark plugs were. This made them feel like they were going crazy. Max yells at Newt that he should have put them in his pocket. Shelley must have come and grabbed them. Newt says, oh, so it's my fault now? They get into a fight, a first real fight that either of them have ever been in, and they weakly punch each other and just roll around in the sand. Finally, Max asks, we done? Newt says, yeah, this was just a waste of energy. Max says he was surprised that Newt even fought back. He didn't seem like the type. Newt says, yeah, well, WWAMD, right? Max has no idea what this means, and just asks if Newt thinks that Shelley took them. They both agree that he probably did, and that was the only likely answer. So, they went off to find him around noon. Max says he doesn't want Shelley touching either of them. But, you don't think that he ate the spark plugs, do you? He asked. Newt says he doesn't know, but he saw Shelley last night, by the fire. He just stared at us, the way that Shelley does. Newt then sort of laughs and says he figured if Shelley died out here, it literally might be for the best, as awful as that sounds. Max saw something new in Newt just then. He never figured if he was in this kind of situation that it would be him and Newt last standing. He'd figure it'd be Kent or Ephraim with him. But he realized now that Newt was a survivalist. Maybe not on the surface, but deep down. He saw that Newt was an extremely hardy guy. He could take a lot. Max says that he doesn't want to talk about Shelley anymore. Let's talk about food. What are our favorite foods? Newt likes that idea, and they talk about peach cobbler and barbecue and pizza. My favorite food is steamed broccoli. There's some pugs over for you. Then they realize that this is starting to make them hungry, and they figure they should stop, probably. Newt laughs as they continue and says, my mom's gonna kill me when this is all over. Max loved that. He loved that Newt still had hope that they were gonna get out of there. Max asks, why would she kill him though? This isn't his fault. Newt says he knows, but he has a story for him. He asks Max if he remembers that sack of flour they got to care for like a baby in home ec. Newt says that some people just threw away the bag of flour or forgot about it. But Newt drew a face on it and really cared for it. But Newt has a condition where his hands are super sweaty all the time. And the more he touched the sack that he was supposed to take care of, the more the fibers got wet and fell apart. He says that sometimes the more you care for something, the more it gets hurt. Sometimes you just have to let it go. And he thinks his mom is like that. They keep walking, and they eventually smell something. Something sickly sweet. It's coming from a cavern in the side of a hill. They figure that he's in there. They talk about if they should, hurt him if he doesn't give up the spark plugs. They both figure they kinda have to. They already hit him with the branch and he's 1 foot in the grave already. There's a very small path leading into the cave, very narrow. They rock, paper, scissors, and Newt loses. Max, feeling bad, says that they can go at the same time, but Newt says no. Fair's fair. Besides, the path is too narrow for them not to go down in single file. They'll go first. Newt and Max walk into the cave, and it's pitch black. A black that covered their skin like an oily substance. Newt was in the front with a makeshift spear, which is only mentioned right now for some reason. Newt figured that weird creatures live in this cave, like olms and such. He thought to himself, WWAMD, right? Well, he figures that Alex Markson would be scared shitless, as who wouldn't right now? The walls were slimy, and little sounds rang out. They figured there were little crabs around the water in the cave. They then heard the noises. God, the noises. Shelley heard the boys coming. He would eat them. Oh yes, he would eat the fat one first, then the skinny one. Or better yet, they could be daddies too. Oh yes, they could. It would be an adjustment, but they could all be friends and all be daddies down here. The boys then turned on the flashlight and they saw that they were in an antechamber in the cave and continued forward to find the spark plugs. And they found them, just sitting in a pool in the middle of the room of the cave. Could it be that easy? They shine a light past the pool and they see it. The thing formerly known as Shelley Longpre. Its limbs unfold like a graceful contortionist. Its skin translucent, only the blue veins visible in the long limbs. Max thought about how it was Christmas recently and his parents bought him a trombone. They wrapped the trombone under the tree, and the whole time Max already knew what the gift was. It was obviously a trombone just wrapped in Christmas wrapping paper. That's what Shelley's limbs reminded him of right now. Trombones wrapped in translucent skin. His stomach was bulbous, distended. Yes, it hissed. Its left eye completely white, with little worms entering and leaving his eyes. Its mouth no longer had teeth, just nerves hanging from the gums like the insides of a pumpkin. It reached out towards Newt with fingers with no fingertips. It had eaten him already. Newt jabs the thing in the face and it staggers back, mewling. Go! Newt screams to Max, and he runs to the edge of the cave and catches a glimpse of the thing's spine. There was a weird, second spine-looking thing, coiled around his normal spine. Perhaps a giant worm wrapped around it. The thing lunges at Max and catches his leg with a bony claw with few fingers. Max can't help it and pisses himself when the thing seems to notice and smile at him. Max unconsciously grabs towards Newt for help, and Newt drops the flashlight and it spins in circles on the ground. Newt stammers backwards towards the center of the cave, and the thing let go of Max and jumps at Newt instead while he was staggered, where it hugs him tightly. Shit, it's gonna... But before Newt could finish that sentence, he felt the thing's bulbous stomach burst on him, like a boomer in Left 4 Dead exploding. The thing's face relaxed, and Newt kicks it and it falls down onto a rock with a sickening snap of its neck. The ending document of this chapter is pretty much a continuation of the last one. An interviewer talking to an admiral, where it's pretty much confirmed that this thing was a bioweapon. And not only that, the admiral knew about it. The interviewer takes out a document signed by the admiral himself, signing off on this experiment of sort. The interviewer grills him once he's got him where he wants him, to which the admiral pleads the fifth. The boys stumble out of the cave, and when Newt looks down at himself, he realizes he's soaked in gore. But in addition to that, he knew he was already infected. He felt the pinpricks all over as soon as it happened. Max gave him some leaves to clean himself off, but he knew it wouldn't help. They decided just to go back to camp. Maybe washing off in the ocean would help. As they walked back through the trees late at night, they heard horrible sounds emanating from the woods, but they didn't even care. Nothing could be as bad as that Shelley thing in the cave. I'm hungry, Max, Newt says. Max says he's hungry too. Newt then says, I bet I'm hungrier. They get back to camp and somehow sleep. Max woke up around 3 a.m. and saw Newt vomiting into a pile of a poisoned plant. He looks at Max and says, mushrooms do the trick. His vomit on the ground alive with worms. He then takes the poisoned plant and rubs it on his leg, figuring the itchiness will give him something to focus on. Newt was violently ill from these mushrooms, vomiting so hard that his eyes' blood vessels burst. Max slept next to him and Newt shooed him away. He didn't want Max to catch this too. To which Max just said, I don't care anymore. In the morning, they saw the helicopter circling around them. They tried to get its attention by throwing rocks at it to no avail. They wondered where Kent was. They said if anyone could have swam to shore, it was Kent after all. Later, Max looked in Newt's eye because he said he was having trouble seeing, and he saw a worm wriggle around and he couldn't bring himself to tell Newt what it was. What is it in there? Tell me, Newt pleaded. Max was silent. Max had to go back to the cave though. They didn't even grab the spark plugs in all the confusion. Newt begged him not to go. He didn't want to be alone. So Max waited until he fell asleep. A small kindness. He went back to the cave and used a flare he found in the cabin. It lit up the walls a sickly yellow color. He told himself he had to be brave. He can always run if necessary and come back. He got to the place where Shelley was and saw the body of it. It looked like a spider pressed between dictionary pages. Weirdly though, his body seemed to have moved. Did the worms carry him away, or did the tide somehow affect the cave water? He didn't know. He finally saw the spark plugs in that pool of water, right where they left him. As he looked around though, he realized that not only were worms near Shelley's body, they were everywhere. He had to be quick, but he was terrified. A fear bubble in his stomach filled with razor blades. He grabbed for the spark plugs and heard a noise coming from Shelley. The flare went out and Max panicked a bit, reaching around. The flare came back to life and he realized he was touching the Shelley thing's body. He feared that if he looked directly at it, it would come back to life. But he looked behind him and looked at the thing, and it was still dead. Moving, though, from the inside. Max steeled his nerves and ran as fast as he could up the incline and out of the cave. When Max got back to the camp, Newt was awake. You left, he said. Max looked at Newt, and it was weird. His cheekbones were visible. He had lost a considerable amount of weight. Newt, the chubbiest boy in school, looked skinny. I'm hungry like you wouldn't believe, Max, he said. Max tells him to suck on a pebble. That's what the natives used to do. Newt did so and then accidentally ate it. Max says that he doesn't even want to look at Newt. Get your things, we're going straight to the boat, Max said. You should go alone, Newt said. Max asks, why the fuck would he do that? Newt says, I'm sick. Maybe they won't let you leave if I'm with you. And maybe they'll think they'll think you are sick too if I'm with you. Max says maybe he's already sick too, it doesn't matter. They can cure us. Whoever they is. Besides, Newt, you aren't sick. You'd feel it if you were, Max says. Newt just looks at Max. I'm scared, Max. Max says he's scared too, but Max refuses to leave Newt. If he didn't leave with Newt, he'd never see him again. He knew that to be true. Max compromises and says, "Here, I'll sit in the front of the boat and you sit in the back. We'll have plenty of distance between us. They'll have no reason not to take us." Newt says he'd like that very much. They got on the boat and Newt put on the scout sash with all of the badges. He didn't know why. Maybe he wanted to show whoever would find them that he was a responsible person. Max yanked the start chain and the boat started. Small miracle that it even worked. His uncle once told him that it's much easier to drive a boat than a car. They get on the boat and push it in the water. "Hey Max," Newt yelled over the roar of the engine. "I had a dream today while you were gone." Max sees shapes coalesce in the distance as Newt was talking. "Me and my mom were in this really nice hotel, and there were these rotating doors, and a man and a woman were arguing in them. Eventually, the man started hitting her, and a bunch of guys came up to help her, but the man said, 'I wasn't hitting her, just teaching her a lesson.' All these guys came up to him and started putting him in a headlock. Then the others in the hotel joined in too and started fighting. A huge brawl broke out of nowhere. Lawyers, doctors, everything." Newt continued his story, and Max saw two boats get closer to them. They had some weird black paint that didn't reflect the moonlight. Then everything sped up. A huge fight broke out and everybody was fighting. Violence was in the air like a virus. My mom tried to put her hand on my shoulder, but I kept shrugging it off. I got so angry that I wanted to bite her fingers off. Violence was in the air. We were breathing it in like a virus. Spotlights appear from the helicopter above them now as Newt finishes his story. Newt looked on in the distance, on a 1,000-yard stare. Max yelled out, "We're okay! Tell them we're okay, Newt!" Newt laughed. A sorry, pitiful laugh. He stood up on the boat and started talking. "I'm fine. I'm aces. But there's one thing. Don't do it, Newt," Max thought. "I'm very..." "Newt, don't do it. Don't. So very, very, very..." "Newt, please, no, 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 no." Newt said the last word, and without a warning, a loud crack rang out across the ocean air. Newt's head flew backwards, and a starfish-sized hole appeared on his neck, leaking blood. Newt fell overboard and sank into the water. Max hardly even had time to scream. The end document of this chapter describes what happened a bit better through an interview with the sniper. The sniper says that he had orders to shoot on sight if someone said one of the trigger words, those being hungry, worm, or infected. He heard the boy say, "hungry." The sniper said he never signed up to shoot an innocent kid. He signed up to serve his country. This day haunted him for the rest of his life. Weirdly, then a second document after the first one. This one is a newspaper article, or a internet article, the title being "The Legacy of the Modified Hydatid." It described how Max Kirkwood is the oldest looking 15-year-old anyone had ever seen. His eyes gaunt, his shoulders permanently in an arch. He had been through so much and still bears the weight of it all. After the incident, they took him to a facility to monitor him for a long time, to make sure he wasn't infected. Every day he's given new clothes made of paper, and every day they burn them after, as a precaution. Max hardly talks anymore, only in disjointed sentences. He refuses to talk about what happened on that island, saying he doesn't remember. Or maybe he doesn't want to remember. He had this to say about the others that were on the island when this started. Scoutmaster Tim was the coolest adult he ever knew, but in a weird way, because he was so uncool that he was cool. He never tried to be cool. Scoutmaster Tim was just himself. Ephraim Elliott was his best friend. He had a big heart, although he never showed it. Something just crawled into his mind on that island, and he never could get rid of it. Kent Jenks was like Superman to him, huge, tough, and unbeatable. He has a hard time coming to terms that Kent is gone. If anyone could have made that swim back to the city, it was Big K. Shelley Longpre had something wrong with him. He's not even so sad that he's gone. It's fucked up to say, but Max doesn't really care. Newton Thornton would have been a good dad. That's all Max knows. A really good dad. He wishes they didn't rag on him so much. When asked if Max could remember anything else about the island incident, the only thing he could say was, there was this turtle. He then gives a small speech that I want to read in full because it's quite beautiful. Do you know how hard it is to kill something? Nothing wants to die. Things cling to their lives against all hope, even when it's hopeless. It's like the end is always there, you can't escape it, but things try so hard not to cross that finish line. So when they finally do, everything's been stripped away. Their bodies and their happiness and hope. Things just don't know when to die. I wish they did. I wish my friends had known that. Sort of, anyway. But I'm glad they tried. That's part of being human, right? Part of being any living thing. You hold on to life until it gets ripped away from you. Even if it's ripped away in pieces. You just hold on. He goes silent, and then he says, I killed a turtle. It sounded like the most wretched confession the interview had ever heard. He wanted to reach out and hug Max, but he was in a hospital room surrounded by plastic. He couldn't. The interview concludes with the interviewer saying things like this can ruin a person's life, especially at that age when things are most vital to be learned. If something like this happens at this stage of life, it makes someone grow up real fast. The last document shows us a Facebook message. It says, To Alex Markson, subject, hey. Hey Alex, we don't know each other really, so maybe this is weird, but I don't know what happened to you. You vanished off Facebook. I hope you're not gone for good, frowny face. I'd miss all of your great posts. So weird, I know, because you're a stranger, but it doesn't feel that way. I guess I was just thinking about you, maybe even a little worried, because of what's been happening lately in my little town. It's been crazy. Not good crazy, scary crazy. Anyway, this is silly. I'm sure you're just taking a break. But still, I hope you're okay. Sincerely, is that weird? Trudy Denson. If you don't remember, Trudy Denson was the girl that Newt had a crush on. This is a really heartbreaking page. After Max was transported out of the hospital, he was considered clean. He got to go home, but things were different. Even though he was not infected, people treated him like he was. All of his friends were gone as well, not to mention Scoutmaster Tim. Regularly, a black van would watch him from across the street of his house. He had to submit fecal samples regularly as well. It gave Max a very small amount of joy to think that a scientist in a white coat who went to college for over 8 years was picking apart his shit. Max had bad dreams now, though. No other dreams than bad. But often, he didn't dream at all. It was just black. His mother kisses him on the forehead tonight instead of on the lips. Side note, what the fuck does that mean? Dr. Edgerton's experiment videos leaked online after, and everybody saw them. Everybody was an expert on the incident. Thought they knew everything about it. But they didn't. It was worse than they even thought. Max found a freak show poster one night in the trash that said, The Amazing Worm Boy. How fitting that that poster had found him. He misses his friends. He had other friends, but none that mattered as much as Ephraim, Kent, and Newt. He daydreamed about them often. Although Shelley was always absent from those daydreams. He appeared in the nightmares instead. Max is a therapist now, ironically the same one that Newt and Ephraim had. He always wore a face mask during their sessions. Max wants to take off his face mask and cough in his face. The Amazing Worm Boy strikes again. Alright, last chapter. Like tradition, I'm going to read the whole last chapter in full. It's real short. One evening, Max borrowed his uncle's boat and piloted it towards Falstaff Island. His heart jogged faster as the island came into view, rising against the horizon like a hump of a breaching whale. The island was charred black, nothing but the odd burnt trees spiking up from the earth. The water had the sterile chlorine smell of a public pool. It was the most desolate place he'd ever seen. It echoed the desolation inside him. The emptiness. The emptiness? Max leaned both hands on the gunwale. A nameless hunger was building inside of him. It gnawed on his guts with his teeth that called his name.
That's it. That is The Troop by Nick Cutter. A long video, huh? I really do like this book. It's not my favorite by any means, but it's better than a lot of the ones we've covered. It drags in certain parts for sure, but I do like the message, and it did get me to feel sad at times. Like always, we're going to get right into the analysis here, and what the themes and the message of the book are. But if you've stuck around this long, somehow, please leave a like and a comment on what you think the message or themes are before you start listening to the analysis and see if you agree with me. Done? Alright, let's get into it. The first message I can think of this book is the loss of innocence, the coming of age, brutally fast, how it feels to be violently thrust into adulthood with absolutely no warning, and how it can create absolute chaos. It can literally just straight up destroy your mind. When people are forced into serious situations at that kind of age specifically, it will destroy their psychology in a lot of cases. This book also is very reminiscent of Lord of the Flies, a book that I probably won't cover because it's so famous. But when an authority figure, or in this case, just adults in general, are taken out of the situation and kids are left to fend for themselves without any rules or leader, mob mentality can often take hold. Another message that I found is when the chips are down and real life-threatening problems show their face, that is when you truly know a person. It could bring out the hero or villain in anyone. Shelley was never normal. In fact, he was kind of always a monster. But when he knew no one would do anything about it, when there were no more rules, that's when he became the real monster. However, quite the opposite happened with Newt, someone who was always very cautious and mindful of how things worked. When those rules were stripped away, he became the hero. He didn't live, of course, but I think that Newt really was the star of the show in this book. At least it seemed like it to me. And in the book, it even just straight up says how you don't know somebody until a true crisis happens. This book also goes a lot into corporate greed and morality of pushing the limits for money, but I could go on all day about that topic because I'm passionate about it, but I won't. But just know that obviously throughout the notes, corporate greed and human greed in general will just end up consuming everything if left unchecked. Now, there are a lot more themes that could easily be touched on, but I want to touch on something that happens nearly at the end of the book that really stood out to me, and there's never really an answer for it in the text at least. And that is Newt's dream after he's infected and already pretty much dying from it. If you remember, it was the one about people breaking out into a fight and violence being in the air. What did that mean? It's never said. Well, I believe it is kind of like the themes we already touched on, and how quickly mob mentality can take over and change people's dispositions without them even knowing it. The violence in the air, as Newt describes it, almost makes him turn on his own mother in the dream. Once again, showing the main theme, which in my opinion is you never really know someone until everything has been taken away from them. In a way, every single person on the island turned into the direct opposite of what they originally were thought to be at the beginning of the book, the facade they put up. Kent, thought to be strong, tough, unbeatable, but in the end died weak and alone. Ephraim was very charismatic, bold, but in the end, he was just really scared. Scoutmaster Tim was powerful, in control, but in the end he died powerless, stripped of all authority. Shelley, well, Shelley was always kind of a monster, but I guess you could say that he was extremely careful and methodical at the beginning, but in the end he got extremely careless and extremely impulsive and got himself killed for it. Newt was thought to be a weakling, milquetoast, but by the end he was truly strong. The hero. Finally, Max was very stoic in the beginning, uncaring, and honestly a little uninteresting, but in the end, he was extremely kind and cared for his friends no matter what, never truly being able to leave that island ever again in his life. Thank you for watching. This might actually be the longest video essay I've done, other than Every Souls Boss Explained, a video I made in 2023, which, don't watch that one, as I didn't script it out and just bullet pointed it, so it's not very good, but this was a really great book. And when I hit 50k subs, I think I'm going to do a tier list video on my favorite dark literature book topics. But if you stayed around this whole time, I cannot thank you enough. You all help make my dreams come true, and I love you all. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.